Well, let's call the meeting to order. I guess we're all here except
Scott Stimson.
Scott here. Okay.
Yeah.
Please take note. There's no action item, so I guess we can go right directly to the work session then. John?
Super. A couple of things I just passed out of interest. As I pull every, my file's getting thicker and thicker on this, as you all understand. We had this discussion, of course, last time about the height of signs near the freeway, which was a matter of significant discussion. And there was some correspondence back and forth. I just gave you copies of it. Forrest he did a lot of research on this. And basically it says Millersburg has the sole authority over a sign. If it's outside of the city, then ODOT's gonna weigh in on it, but inside the city, not so much. And like it says in this email chain, when a person comes into the city for a sign permit, appears a sign may also require state of Oregon permitting. It's advisable to have them contact it, but they will not override Millersburg sign approval. So we can't put this monkey on the state's back in terms of what you want to do. So the question that was at hand, and let's just get started with a fun one tonight, is the provision for commercial signs. The code, it allows any property that fronts the freeway right-of-way to have a 50-foot freestanding sign. We figured out Love's was closer to 100 feet. It was allowed. So the issue is, what do you want to do about that? There was some sentiment to not allow freestanding signs of this nature. Just say that it's the same as any other business, which means you don't allow the extraordinarily high sign. There was some sense that didn't necessarily feel that way. I wanted to just allow them. So it'd be good to come to some decision on that, what you want to do with it.
With my opinion on that sign, number one on the freeway, you need a high sign. You don't want a low sign when somebody gets right up to the exit and all of a sudden, oh, there's a sign. I think being as we are on the freeway, I think we're gonna have to make some allowances on tall signs. I understand the reasoning behind signs in, say, residence, say like Corvallis. That freeway, you need that visibility.
But what about the ODOT fuel and lodging and food signs?
What about-
Why wouldn't they suffice?
Those blue ones,
The blue ones that
They have
say
to pay
food
for
next
those.
exit?
Yeah,
they have to pay for those, but it's not that much, it's like $100 a year, I don't know.
It's less than the.
If you've ever traveled the freeway, what you're gonna see is that neon sign before you see those cookie cutter that are on every exit.
And, yeah, the blue ones along every exit, half of the time of trucks, I can't see a truck's in the way as I'm going by.
Well, that's true, but
Yeah,
then doesn't that give an unfair advantage to the people that can afford a high sign?
Not really, this is a freeway, and they need that advertising. I have spent a lot of time with trucks on the freeway, well, not a lot of, but, pretty soon my eyes get tired. My eyes are also not as good as they used to be.
Sure.
And I relied, when we had a truck and I only had so much fuel to get to the next stop, and there was times I was praying to see a sign. At night, you don't always see those cookie stamp signs.
Well, we don't have a lot of exposure along the freeway, actually.
No, but I can see where that sign does need to be read.
I agree.
Oh,
And, I mean, we have a buffer zone between that and, I mean, there's an industrial
Not
area
when not when you go
between us.
down Old Salem, you're sitting right next to the freeway. If a car comes across that little 2-foot fence, you're in deep doo-doo.
What's that got to do with the sign?
What's that gonna do? I mean, I'm
Well,
talking.
no,
we
you
have-
said
we have an
in
industri-
setbacks, you said.
We have an industrial zone that cordons off from if we're afraid about offending the neighbors. I mean, I can see the sign from my house, but it doesn't offend me at all. I'm happy to have them here.
And to me, it's tough to make a blanket, you can have this, can't have that, when every situation in that regard would be different.
It's true.
One of the
One,
things.
one place might propose a thing that totally makes sense for them because they can't see or whatever, and now, oh, you can't do it because you're 2 feet above. So, to me, that's like a blanket statement, you can't, when there's a lot of circumstances that could mitigate that.
Well, right now, I'm noticing like the left sign, when you're coming south, there's all those big trees
Yeah, you can't
before
see
the
it.
exit. You can't even see that 110-foot sign.
Okay,
I mean, so until you're like right at the exit, you can't hardly
Past
see
it
it.
Okay.
at freeway speed.
Is there any research that speaks to how high a sign must be in order to be seen from X number of feet away? I mean, because I can, we could have approved a 300-foot sign and,
Well, it's like Connie says, it's line of sight.
Mhm.
If there's anything in the way, you don't see it.
You don't see
yeah,
it
you don't.
anywhere.
So-
you used to be able to see the TNR sign from Seattle.
That's right.
I thought that was
No.
Michelle.
On the other hand, you can't pick and choose signs, you gotta have a base to start with.
I'm okay with the 50-foot, and then maybe this is one of those that we say unless the planning commission. You hate that, I know.
No, you don't wanna do
And I
that.
hate that
Because there's no
too.
criteria by which you can make a
case
judgment, other than
by
just
case.
arbitrary.
Yes.
The other thing to consider, and I think it's came up when we last met, is this 50-foot sign could be out on Old Salem Road rather than back at the freeway. Of course, that's the way Love's is. So maybe one possibility I'll throw out is let it be 50 feet, but say it has to be within 50 feet of the freeway right away. So it's not necessarily out on the street frontage. If you're worried about that aesthetic along the road there.
Along with Salem or along the freeway? I'd rather have it on the freeway.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is if it's gonna be 50 feet, it has to be within 50 feet of the freeway, right away.
Well, you've
So it's
already
truly
got
a
one on
freeway
Old
sign.
Salem where by the potty thing there, the one that keeps changing,
Do it so many feet away from
Oh,
the
yeah.
site.
the big one, go to church now and all that
What's
stuff.
the square footage that you have with that 50-foot sign?
It's the only way.
Commercial signs are 1.5 square feet of total allowed sign area for each lineal foot of building frontage, maximum total allowed of 150 square feet.
150.
So that's a 10 by 15, but that would be their only sign. That's where you get interesting when you're talking about these kind of double frontage things like Love's, where you really kind of need some signage on Old Salem as well as visible from the freeway, and that place is full of signs.
Well, you're talking building signs or freestanding?
Well, actually, it's total.
Well, it's total.
total.
So I think, well,
what's the,
if they're gonna have a
it talks
sign
about
on
the
it,
federal highway beautification law, but that sounds pretty loosey-goosey,
Mm-hmm.
of course.
I can tell you that in my conversations with ODOT, the criteria took in a lot of line of sight, different criteria. So you're not able to just say it's 300 square feet is too large. But she did say it's very egregious violation of beautification, and then the federal will step in. But this love sign did not step in and was not a violation of it. Anything you see along the freeways right now is not a violation of it. So it's something, as she said, characterize it, it's very egregious. And she
Sure.
wasn't able to give me.
And so I guess if someone would come in and want a 300-foot sign, then we'd check with them
Correct, yes.
also.
Yes.
Or I understand they'd be directed to check with them before they came to us.
Yes,
From
now, yes, and they will not overturn anything the city approves as long as it's not in violation of the federal beautification criteria.
Well, you've got here that it's limited to a maximum of 48.
Yeah, I'm just reading it. It's a freestanding sign's a maximum of a 4 by 8 panel. That's what it means. 48?
that's 30.
That's
4 by
36, yeah.
12.
4 by 12, thank you. What if,
That's a pretty small sign.
what if these standards that are in here, it's on page 28 for those of you that are trying to keep up. Is that what it's on? Yeah, I have it as 36, so it's right in there. It's section 3.106.11.
Article 3?
Yes,
What page
Article
was it?
3.
Page 35. Okay, you got a ways to go, boss.
3.106.11.
Come on.
Page 35. Subsection.
Okay, so there's signs for businesses not in integrated business centers, that's where we find this. And so that would apply to any new business in the community would meet these standards. But if they want to do a freeway sign, it takes away signage that might be on their frontage, their working frontage, where they actually have access. So I wonder if this would be better to come up with saying you can have this, plus if you have freeway frontage, you're allowed another freestanding sign that has to be on the freeway frontage for the purpose of advertising.
You mean two then, one on Old Salem and one on the freeway?
Yeah.
You actually are allowed two,
Yeah.
but but that's limited to 48 square feet each, which would leave them another 54 square feet of wall sign. Well, maybe that's not unreasonable.
Yeah, but the freeway sign shouldn't have anything to do with the building sign. They're two different entities, at probably two different locations.
Yeah, so.
Well, that's the next thing is, we were talking about, so if somebody over here, say they put a business in this, or a business area over here, they can rent a sign from somebody on the freeway. Because they have that position to do that.
If it's not available,
Right.
yeah.
Do we want to, you have to advertise where you are? Or do we want to allow that?
One should not have anything to do with the other because they're totally separate locations.
Well, right, but what I'm
We can
saying-
have a building sign, but then have a, freeway sign.
Well, right, so say, well, I'm just saying, so
Yeah.
McDonald's goes in over here,
Mhm.
but somebody over here on the industrial side wants to allow them to put a sign on their property, so they run a McDonald's sign up there at 100.
Absolutely.
I mean, is that something we want to consider, or is that something we want to say you have to have, your business has to be within the I-5 on the, I don't know if I'm saying it right, you have to be adjacent to the freeway to be able to put that sign up. It can't,
Oh, I see.
Well, what if they want Burma-shade type stuff?
The problem is,
50
there's a
miles down.
Supreme Court case that clearly says you cannot regulate content, which means you can't, say a person can't rent their allowable signage out to somebody else, because then you're regulating content. The court was really clear on that. In fact, what they said is, if in order to know if a sign complies, you have to go outside and look up at it and read it, your code doesn't work. Your code violates the Constitution.
The way Albany is, and Forrest will correct me if I'm wrong, but when we put signs up on buildings, we have a signpost on Pacific and Ninth, and we are regulated in height and also the size of the sign. Now, if you move the new liquor store that went in on the old Barrett building, they can only put signage on the signs on Pacific and Ninth and on their building. They cannot put it over another building in the same building. So there's rules and laws, I think, to regulate kind of what you're saying. There's still put a bit of McDonald's up there and to put it, and have McDonald's down here. I don't think that's an issue if we follow what I think is the city of Albany's codes, which I'd like to stay close to, because we have the same inspectors. I wouldn't want to deviate by having, that would really add confusion. You're shaking your head on that.
We have county inspectors, not all.
Oh, okay. Well, I knew we had inspectors that we share. I stand corrected. We have shared inspectors that could cause a little confusion, even though we are the
Well,
same.
we're sharing them with everybody in the county, not with Albany.
Well, what I was getting at is the building inspectors, and that's electrical, correct?
Building and electrical.
Or all county? Okay. Well, I'd like to stick with the county rules and regulations versus deviating from, it'd cause havoc with builders.
Well, I'd like to know what the county regulations are before I agree to that. That's way too vague. You want to stick with the county regulations, what are they?
Well, I haven't found them vague, they're pretty tight on what they want to do.
But what are
Try to
they?
put- Try to put up a sign. For us, signs, for instance, has to apply for. a
But you were
permit.
talking about within the city limits of Albany, not within the county.
Okay, I will rephrase that.
I don't mean to argue with you, I just
No,
want
no,
to know what
I-
it is you're asking for.
No, I'm not wanting to have separate rules from the county or the city of Albany. I'd like to be more uniform.
Okay,
Would
I guess
you
my
like
point
to
is, I
look-
think they may be different already, the city and the county. There's nothing that says they hold hands.
Janelle?
So, well, the county inspectors will inspect this, they'll review and inspect signs that require structural side of things. But as far as determining whether they meet our code requirements, the county does up without it to us. And then we submit the building permit to them and they look at it from a technical standpoint, but they're not looking at our stuff. And we discovered this in lots of ways. To meet any planning requirements, there's 4 hours. They leave that to us and expect us to do it. So I don't know that it makes any difference to the inspector if they're still meeting the structural requirements.
Yeah, it's the same as like a residential setbacks. They're gonna be different between us and the city of Albany and other parts of the county. So we do our review in-house before we send it to the county for review. Whatever we stamp approved for the site plan is what they inspect to make sure that's how it's built.
So we like to keep standards the same with the inspectors for what they're expecting for, but they're not expecting for
Yeah.
this part.
If we stamp a sign's good at 300 feet, and as long as it meets their structural integrity review, then they say it's fine, they can build it.
When did they invent sign inspectors? Recently, or has it been a long time?
There's
We could be
structural-
stuck here for hours, I mean, talking about signs. I mean,
Yeah.
John, what's
Sign
our,
inspectors, give me a break.
what's our assignment again?
Well,
You like this one?
what do you want to do with that provision in the code that says a property that fronts on the freeway can have a sign that's 50 feet tall, when it's 12 feet for everybody else?
I think we need to
12 feet for
forward to people the
everybody else.
opportunity to welcome business and.
Absolutely.
I think,
To the
I think
freeway.
the freeway definitely has a different standard than Old Salem Road.
We need to be business friendly.
Yes.
Can we make a vote on that? Rather than discuss it to death?
Okay, here we go. In Albany, a business within a freeway interchange area may have one freestanding sign up to 50 feet tall. That's where this came from. Maximum sign area is limited to 250 square feet for one face, 500 for 2 or more faces. And if such a sign is erected, it shall be in lieu of and not in addition to the signs permitted for such business along the street frontage. So it's giving, in Albany, they give the person a choice. You can have that freestanding sign out on your street frontage, or you can have a big sign next to the freeway.
Or two
Oh,
little
one
signs.
or the other.
One or the other. One or the other.
One or the other, or,
But they can put
one or
one
the
on the
other.
building.
Yeah, that is
Just can't have a freestanding one.
Can't have a freestanding one.
Can't have two freestanding
Yeah,
ones.
so they're given a choice.
That's fine.
You like that?
Sounds perfectly reasonable to me.
And what I would do with that is just lift that language. We'd have a section just for freeway area signs, basically. All right, shall I just draft it that way?
Everybody
Okay.
like that one?
well, why isn't 3.106A3B significant, I mean, okay, I mean, because it says, except for businesses and industry located adjacent to Interstate 5. Why do we have to have a whole new section?
Well, because you actually have two different areas of signage that could apply. One is for a freestanding business, the other is for an integrated business center. So by just having a separate section, it kind of calls it out a little more clearly. But the other factor is this gets into that either or. It's giving a property owner that choice. I mean, it could get integrated into each of these sections, or it could be called out separately as Albany does it. Seems to me it's just a little cleaner if it has its own freestanding section and isn't written or woven into the language for each of the other types of codes.
So you're proposing to make it either or?
But that's the way Albany has it.
Okay,
You either have a big one on the freeway or you have one along the street.
but you can still have one on the building.
Yeah, you still have all the wall signs.
I think that's great. What do you guys think?
I'm good with that.
Like that? Why don't we go with that?
Okay.
Sean, may I just ask you a question though? I'm looking at the Albany code. Are you talking about where they're talking about the freeway interchange?
Yeah.
Now, though, if you go on to,
Yeah, and that's factor in Albany.
right,
Right.
and because they though are just limiting, they've got a diagram of that freeway interchange. So, though, are we, the criteria you're just setting, is that along the entire I-5? And I don't know what that is. That's different than what,
You're right. So understand Albany applies this only on its two interchanges, or
Yeah.
one, yeah, its two
Yeah,
interchange
right.
areas. Right, you can see it
That's
there.
McDonald's.
Exactly. And so the question is, would you want to do basically that same thing here, which means Palm Harbor that's, you know, a long ways away, or anything that builds around Palm Harbor that's not at an interchange wouldn't have this available to them. It's only things that are right at the interchanges. Or should apply to businesses along the entire frontage.
Yeah, you
I
gotta-
would say the
entire
entire
way.
frontage.
You have to take down the expo sign.
That's kind of what I thought, just thinking about it myself. Okay, I'm gonna draft it for the entire frontage, and
Yeah.
everyone can chew on it.
Because you'd have to take down the expo sign at the expo center, the airport sign.
So
Okay.
are we gonna limit how
Those
many
are
is
not
there?
in
Because
energy.
when you're coming, there's already billboard, 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 billboard.
Yeah.
And if we're gonna have them have more, is there, that's just a lot. So is there,
It's one per business.
One for
Okay.
business, that's the limiting factor. And if they put it there, they can't put one out on Old Salem.
but it
So
has to be
expensive.
on their property.
Yeah, this accrues to the property itself. For every property would have the capability of putting one up. And they have to have a building to put it up. In other words, a person couldn't take a vacant piece of land and put a sign on it. It has to have a building there in order to put a sign up. That's just a general provision that's in here.
I don't
So-
think it's as big as you, how many new billboards have gone up here in the last 25 years? It's not a big issue.
Well,
How many new billboards do you think are going up anytime soon?
well, the carousel one just did, but that could have already been there with something else on it.
No, I'm talking brand new billboard
Yeah.
being built.
Yeah.
They're not.
Back to what comment
It's
you
not
made
doing it.
earlier. If a business is leasing sign space from a billboard company, does that count as your sign?
I would say no. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's what you got currently on I-5 in Lewisburg. There's signs
Because it's not on your
leasing
property
space.
usually.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
We can't regulate.
that's regulated content.
We can't
How do you
regulate.
regulate sign companies from coming in and putting up leasable sign spaces?
They have
Well-
to have a building and own the property.
That's right. And so this code doesn't specifically call out billboards or outdoor advertising on purpose. No matter what goes up, it has to comply with this 100-foot maximums, you know, related to the building and all of that. So this really would not allow any more billboards at all to go up.
100 foot or 150?
Well, it's 150 square feet total. Or actually it's 48 for a freestanding sign. So, I mean, just by the regulation, you can't put a new billboard up. But we don't call them out specifically, because if we did, the industry would just get all over that.
Well, could Palm Harbor replace their sign with one that could be leased?
One that could what?
Be leased?
Sure, they could.
But then they couldn't have one out on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they would have-
I think they already have both anyway, don't they?
Okay, well, that was fun. remember, we're just putting a draft together, so you've got time to chew on this stuff. We were walking through the sign code from that point, that's really where we left off last time. But I want to go back, I gave you another handout. A couple of deals with this. You wanted to get some information on what maybe a diagram would look like having to do with fencing. So I actually dug around trying to find what cities have for brochures. Couldn't find any. But still, this diagram from the Kaiser Development Code gives an example of the typical fence design. And the reason it looks like this, and you can decide whether you like this or not, it's a 6-foot maximum height except within 10 feet of the front property line. And at that point, it's only a 4-foot maximum height. That's very traditional zoning. It is predicated on the idea of not creating a canyon effect of streets with tall fences in front of properties. And also it's predicated on a safety factor of allowing visibility of what's going on the property, kids running around, whatever it might be. A lot of communities, especially older communities, don't have provisions like this, and you probably have been a lot of places that have fences that run along the sidewalk that are tall. Essentially, you go through a gate to get into a yard more like a door almost to get into a yard. Those things are not uncommon in a lot of communities. This is a very traditional zoning provision. It's what you have in your code now. And it's so we're perpetuating that. We would include diagrams like this that would help explain that to a person.
How about the tree visibility thing?
That goes to the next page. There we go. Which is the vision clearance area at corners. And it talks about how measuring it, but back in the code it explained what goes into it. But these diagrams show how you measure that. And what the code says is that you can't put anything in the vision clearance area, I think it's higher than 36 inches or lower than 8 feet. So if you have a tree in that area, that's okay, but you've got to limit up at least 8 feet above grade.
Because I know there's a lot of corners where you can't see because of a tree or bush or something.
Yeah, and you get those bushes that just grow and grow and nobody ever trims them
And
back.
how does one enforce that?
I personally think it should be higher.
Then 4 feet?
I'm just biased, but
Okay, you
when
mean-
you're sitting in a garbage truck or
Oh,
any
yeah.
type of a truck, you can't see with it 8 feet, because you're there.
Yeah, in fact, I think Salem, I think it's 14
It should be
feet.
14 feet.
Yeah, for exactly that clearance issue.
14 to what, setback?
14, so if you have a tree, you
underneath.
should have clearance
Okay,
underneath it.
The limits can't
Yeah,
start
in
until
fact,
14 feet.
you know
up.
what it is? It's 8 feet over a sidewalk and 14 feet over a street.
It has to be.
Yeah.
For that very reason, because it's your sanitation trucks, it's your sweepers, it's all of those things to give clearance.
Can we go back to the front setback?
Yeah.
I'd like to see that clear back, instead of 10 feet, clear back to the front setback. Or would be back to the corner of the house. This way, you can be a good neighbor, you can watch out for them, otherwise you can't see a darn thing. Even somebody coming down the sidewalk on a bicycle maybe, when you're backing out.
I didn't get that. What you trying to do, Jim?
Well, on the picture over here, the sketch,
Uh-huh.
they show 10 foot for the
Yeah.
4 foot high.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to see that clear back to the front setback of the house.
Oh, I see.
So it actually opens up the whole neighborhood more than a 6 foot fence clear out there. Is that a problem? Can we change that?
Sure.
Not unless I want to build a house and have a fence all over
The
it.
neighbors is,
What?
He wants to build a wall.
the neighbors is
Well,
12 feet high.
I think it's just a good neighbor policy to have it back there.
I think it's a good neighbor issue. It's a good neighbor issue.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think so.
So right now, we have 6 feet.
Yeah, but
It's a maximum 6 for the fence, except in this front vision area, where it's 4.
what if you have really deep lots and houses are set back quite a ways?
Well, then you can set back your fence.
Well, you got a choice of even putting up a fence if you don't want one. This is if you do.
Oh, sure, oh, sure.
Yeah, it's not uncommon in communities that
It's
have
not-
this, you'll
it's
find
not going
people
all
that
the way
will
back to
build
the
a
house, it's
6-foot
just going
fence,
back
but they
to the
set it
setback,
back
whatever that is.
10 feet or 20 or whatever.
You're
that
Oh, no, I get all
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
but what if my house sits 100 feet back from the street?
But your setback's not that far, that's just where you put it.
Oh, just what the
Yeah,
setback
you
is
measure
supposed
it
to be.
based on
Not what it
Setback is
actually
what,
is.
25, whatever the footage in front?
Not what it actually is, what it's
No,
supposed
no,
to
no,
be.
just what the setback dictates.
Gotcha, no problem. That works,
Pretty much our community.
Then everything would be uniform.
that'll work.
I think we're pretty much already
I
there.
mean, I look down my street and that's
I
pretty
don't know.
much what it is.
My next door neighbor's fence comes 12 feet high all the way out to the sidewalk.
Well, then you
I
better
like
file a
10
complaint.
feet high.
It does become an enforcement issue.
Yeah.
Must raise your rafters or something.
Jim will be out there tomorrow.
He's built a retaining
James
wall.
on.
filled
Okay,
in,
actually what-
parks his RV there and then his fence.
What the code says is it's 6 feet for a fence, maximum height. In fact, generally you need a building permit if you go higher than 6 feet because of wind loads and things like that. So 6 feet. But a solid or closed fence can be 3 feet high in that open front area, or if it's a open fence, chain link or something, it can be 4 feet high.
So John, is a chain link was last considered a solid?
Yep, it is.
That's our current code.
Our current code for what? Fences?
For fences.
It was
Right
lined
now.
out.
Yeah,
It was struck. We don't have a
Oh.
current fence code.
Okay, well, I'm looking at one of the many copies of the code that exists.
Don't push that button.
Right, yeah, okay, so the question is, what do you want to do for fences?
So this sketch is showing 4 foot high in front? Or
Yeah.
3?
It's 4.
Actually,
Or does it say
I-
3?
I would prefer to see 3.
Yeah, but that's not gonna keep animals in if you're gonna let your animals in.
Well, if you look at that sketch,
No animals out
Now
there.
remember, that's
That's
just an
not-
example of what a sketch would look like, to give you an idea. It's
You
not
can have a
what's
gate
code.
across so that they could keep, this doesn't have to have an opening. I
I'm
think,
saying if it was 3 foot, that
I
wouldn't be
know.
tall enough. I'm okay with that. 4 foot.
okay.
What's anybody else think? Ed, you're being quiet for a change.
Well, I was only concerned about the
You don't
sign,
have
I
any
could care less
fences.
about
Well,
fence. You know,
actually-
so I don't-
I don't have any
I
fences.
don't have
You're raising
no,
your hand.
I don't have no fence
Yeah,
around my
I don't have
place.
any fences.
Well, I think what we need to remember,
Yes.
this is a maximum, not a minimum.
Right,
You can build shorter, but you can't build taller.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, why don't you speak to that?
so, for the way the fence height is measured, if someone builds up their yard, builds a retaining wall, you can't put the fence on the retaining wall, well, but, when they put that just inside the retaining wall, it's measured from the height of the retaining wall up. You get 6 feet above that, so that's how you end up with these places where it looks like they have a sense of high difference, but that's how it's measured. Now, if somebody goes and builds a fence down at, say, the sidewalks here, and they build it 8 feet tall and fill their yard up, and build a retaining wall on the inside of the fence, then the wall is the fence is the height that you see from the outside, but that's where people get confused sometimes on the fence height. It's the height of the physical structure, not.
from the outside? Or does it matter?
From the ground
You're saying
level
it
is what
doesn't
she's
matter.
saying, from the
Yeah,
ground level.
up, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, the way that's addressed is you measure it from the grade of the adjacent street or sidewalk, whichever exists, not from.
Well, that's not how we've been doing it.
No.
No,
That
that,
would be a change.
Okay.
So if you build, if your yard is built up 2 feet inside, your property, then if we did that, you could only have a 4 foot tall fence,
Or 2 feet.
or 2 feet.
So,
But
yeah,
that's not
it's
how we
measured
have
from,
it.
it's measured
Okay.
from the filled property side.
Okay, well, we'll make sure it's consistent with the way it's done.
The only thing with a fence 4 feet wide, having a pool by state codes and insurance, it has to be 4 feet. So if you have a attractive nuisance, then you better be 4 feet.
you can put your pool in your front yard.
Well, then I'd have to build a 4-foot fence. I don't want a fence in my front yard, so I put it in the backyard.
Yeah, I think
Then
that's
you got a
probably
6
normal.
foot maximum.
And for
So these
looks,
are maximums, not minimum.
Okay, well, they were discussing the height of the front yard, you're right, but I just want to add that for attractive nuisance, if you do have a bird bath, koi pond, something like that in your front yard. I just was throwing that out there. That's what, 4 foot. Am I right, Janelle?
I didn't catch all of your things.
No, I says I have a 4-foot fence, we were discussing 3 and 4 foot. The state, insurance-wise, required me to put a 4-foot, minimum 4-foot fence for security. That was code.
And that's an extra fence, is it not? I mean, if you have a fence around your yard, you still have to have that 4-foot fence around the pool.
I would say if you had a 6, I don't know, I can't answer that one.
That's what it
You have
is.
20-foot fence around the pool, it's not
Yeah.
property. It's not-
and for looks, I like the idea of taking it all the way back to the front
I
setback.
think that's what he's gonna write up.
Because if you go back 10 feet and yet you're 25 feet back,
Mhm.
so then you've got this break in it, I think that looks funky, I don't know.
Okay. I also wanted to point out that handout that had the illustrations. You like those illustrations?
Yes.
Peppered through it? Okay, I'll clone these. This actually is the first code I wrote from scratch in May of 1998. Wow. This was the Kaiser Development Code, and we won a big planning award for it for its ease of use. So hopefully I'll do even better this time to make it ease of use. But part of that was what you see here with the illustrations and also across the bottom, like, you know, having a big page number and stuff like that, so it was easy to find your way through it. So I would intend to produce the final draft so it look like this, unless someone has a better idea. Okay. All right, that was fencing.
Well, our code says swimming pools shall have 6 feet.
Yeah, and actually Matt and I talked about that and said that's actually regulated by building code, and so we probably don't even need to have it in here. Because to put in a swimming pool, you have to put in a fence around it. But, and I think it's a 6-foot fence.
Well, it says 6 foot here.
I know it is here.
But you
so.
said 4 feet.
Well,
In the front yard.
that's what my,
Oh, swimming pool in the front yard.
Yeah, so that's kind of unlikely.
It's koi pond.
Yeah, it's all in the koi pond. All right. Let's press on. Back in the sign code where we were, which I think was page 35, that's where we kind of left off there. You're page 35, mine's 36, I think.
Oh, did you see my email where I wanted to go hit a couple things? Can we do that at the end, or whatever? Doesn't matter.
Should we, do those relate to signs? I can't remember.
No.
I didn't think so. So why don't we get through the sign code part of this, and then, Connie, why don't you bring those up? Okay, so I do want to point out a few things here on signs. Temporary business signs. So this is 3.106.11, section D. Temporary business signs. These are always a wild topic.
Page 36.
Page 36, okay.
What page?
36.
I like page numbers.
Lots of signs for temporary.
Oh, that's for temporary businesses. Wait a minute, I also wanted to hit one for temporary signs for an existing business. I jumped over that. Just want to make sure we're covered on that. Where is that?
That'd be about 4 by 8, wouldn't it?
Okay, signs generally permitted. Prohibited signs.
Well, on page 30,
Portables.
there's a definition of a temporary sign.
Yeah, and actually, if you get into 3.106.07, prohibited signs,
33.
there's not a whole lot in here about temporary signage, where a business puts up a, an A-frame sign or something out in the front saying whatever it says, or the famous, as the sign industry calls them, feathers, those big tall things on poles that say things. It says here, portable signs are not allowed except for a temporary business. In fact, it's not even really clear on temporary signs, but I just want to know what your intent or wish is, thinking about the temporary signs that a business may want to use. Do you care how many? And many communities don't. Or do you care that there's clutter and you may not want to have some or any temporary sign? Some sense about,
We don't have
Yeah.
any time restrictions anywhere here. And I've seen temporary signs on buildings that say grand opening 5 years later,
yeah.
that look pretty ratty.
And our portable signs, little trucks that are painted and parked.
Yeah, those
We
actually
started to go
are,
into that a little bit.
yeah, those are prohibited.
Okay.
Using a
Fine.
vehicle as a sign, it says spray foam or something on the side of it, or whatever it said, I don't know. Yeah, in fact, it says here, the use of a vehicle or a trailer parked on a public right-of-way or public property or private property visible from the public right-of-way, which has a sign on it for the purpose of being a sign. That's prohibited. That's, and that's where you get a crazy once in a while with a person that's parking their commercial vehicle and it happens to be visible from the street. But it moves every day. That's okay if it's being used in the business. But if it's parked purely for the purpose of being a sign, this doesn't allow it. But the other issue, though, I want to just get your clarity on are those temporary signs that businesses like to put up. Is that okay? Or do you want to put some limit on that?
Okay.
Is it a problem that in the community where you see
Gotta let them
somebody?
have temporary signs. They might have a special spring fling thing
Right.
going and all that. You can't limit that.
You have trucks, all of them advertised, and I don't want to get into this
Yeah.
with enforcing a nuisance law. How are you going to tell Frito-Lay that they can't park the truck in front of the store?
Yeah, well, if it's moving and it's used in the business, then it's not a sign. It's only if it's parked, someone just parks it permanently and never moves it. And it basically has a billboard on the side of it, that's,
I think we're trying to regulate too much. We have too much regulation already.
Yep.
okay, so that's one question. The other is, what about the small portable
Is
signs?
he talking about sandwich boards?
Sandwich boards, those
Absolutely.
feathers, the thing that says Budweiser that hangs, by cords and it's made of vinyl on the side of the tavern. Those are temporary signs that are different than the permanent signs, obviously. They are intended to go up temporarily. As you say, sometimes they go up and they stay up for years. I don't know if it's an issue. I don't know if you're concerned about it.
Not an issue. Not concerned.
Well, do we know if other codes have time restrictions?
A lot of them
I think that'd be
The
so
city,
arbitrary.
the city of Albany does, they don't want it in the sidewalks, the right-of-ways, it's like putting up a political sign. Right now, I don't see that we have an issue out here, and again, we're enforcing something that's gonna only be a nuisance, that somebody from the city of Millersburg is gonna have to go out, tell them to move the sign. I haven't seen a problem with it.
And the other issue you get in with time, you can have it up for 90 days. Well, who's gonna measure that? Someone's got, which means you almost get into a sign permit, a temporary sign permit process, so that you actually could track the amount of time, and it is an administrative issue to do that. Jake can only work 20 hours a day, so,
They're gonna hire more people.
yeah.
Well, what would constitute,
It's a nuisance.
what would constitute a public nuisance then?
Well, for the most part, it's signs in the right of way, which really aren't even covered so much by this, where we don't allow signs that go in the right of way that actually might obscure vision, obscure the capability of a person to walk down the street or something like that. Signs that are on private property.
Well, it becomes a nuisance probably when there's a complaint, and only when.
Yeah, but you know, you'd have to have a code that basically would prohibit them or limit them to actually have a valid complaint. Because you have to be complaining about a
So we
person
can
not
say,
complying
oh
with
yeah,
the
here in our
code.
code, it says this, and we'll go get it.
Can we not come back and address this if it becomes a problem?
Sure.
It certainly isn't now.
In the next comp review, what is it we go over every 5 years? We don't have a problem here, or even 7 years. If it gets to be a problem, then let's look at it at our next review.
Temporary signs allowed.
Without significant restriction. Okay.
So they can plaster their whole building with it, or does that, do we have a size limit like the other signs, or why are you smiling?
'Cause there's really nothing,
What I really like is the going out of business that never does. There's a furniture store in Salem that's been doing this for 15 years, right on Front Street.
it is.
That's the name of the
Kubler
business.
Furniture.
Hubler's.
My point of view that
You know which one I mean.
businesses have enough rules, laws, and regulations. It's hard to be an independent business.
I understand
Let's
it.
put
I
in more
understand
rules,
it.
laws, and regulations.
All right.
Anyway.
Okay, so we're just gonna let that one rest. I'd like to look with you at section 3.106.12, which I believe would be on your page 39. 3.106.12, conditional use permits,
37.
37, okay. So this is a provision that's just thrown in here so that you can think about it and decide whether you want to do it or not. And a lot of communities do this, that if a sign involves movement, I mean, it's rotating, revolving, that kind of thing, it goes through a conditional use process, and generally the size of the sign might even be limited. And where that becomes more interesting in the contemporary world are the signs, of course, that are video screens, which, you know, change all the time. The question to you is, are those things of concern to where you would want to regulate them through a conditional use process, or do they just fall just as with any other sign, where you don't see any issue permits if they comply with the code?
You're talking about, you want to explain what one, would that be like those blow-up things with a clown dancing?
No, that'd be a
No, no, no.
temporary.
It's like a sign out.
That'd be temporary.
It's like a
It's-
city sign out front here with a
Yeah,
message board on it.
it's mostly message boards. I mean, you go back to the good old days of like the Union 76 ball that would spin on top of the post, or, you know, classic signs.
Dating yourself.
Yeah.
But not a time
Definitely.
and temperature.
So, you know, what this says is that for anything that basically has movement incorporated in the sign, you go through a conditional use process, which means there'd be a hearing, you'd make a decision on it.
I'd say it falls in the sandwich sign thing. We have no issue now. Let's
Yeah.
address that in the next comp if we have an issue with it.
I don't agree. I like that we should have some say in that.
Do they,
And
do
I
they,
don't like government regulation either, I really don't, but
Did the city ask you how big a sign they could have out there for their message board?
They didn't even come to us and
Yeah,
ask
they
if they
didn't
could
come
have
and
a
ask
sign, they
us
just
that.
did.
so do these,
Sorry,
do these
boss.
also comply with the square footage?
Yeah,
Okay.
they fall within that.
I mean, when you delve into it deeper, isn't there national standards for the time that it can display and?
The-
You know,
the brightness
no,
can
there,
be-
there aren't, and
the
cities go to
brightness
the
and-
mat over that.
Well, yeah.
You know, speaking of Front Street, the new Gaddy building, you probably have seen it, that's got that big, gorgeous frame practically that has changing photographs and stuff in it in there. This is on Front Street in Salem, and, you know, it became a huge issue in terms of the city originally said that that can't change more than once every 2 minutes, because they didn't want to get it into a distracting thing. And And the property owners of the sign company wanted it once every 8 seconds. And they just went to the mat, ended up, I think, picking 30 seconds or something. But no, there's just no standard for that.
We have 20 seconds here. No, we
So-
have 10 seconds, 12 seconds,
12 seconds.
12 seconds.
So I'm hearing some sentiment to forget it as a section, and others to say, no, need to look at something.
I think with these video signs, as bright and as fast as they can be, that we really should look at this stuff. And I'm thinking more of the video signs than I am of the, like our sign, but those things, I've seen them be very bright and very fast, very distracting.
Especially at night.
Yeah, but you quit looking at them after the second time you go by, because they're so fast you can't read anything anyway, so you just don't.
Well,
pay
that or you
attention.
quit looking at them when you're in the ditch, and you can't see it any longer.
I agree, I think we need to take a look at that.
I want the opportunity to say yea or nay on it.
I'm hearing two, we're looking for some consensus of whether you want to keep this in the draft for the purpose of
For a
carrying
conditional
it through
use
the
permit.
review. Yeah.
Yes,
This is pretty specific.
what do you say?
Yes, I want it.
I say keep it.
You got- We think we ought to keep it in, I think we should.
I don't think we have a problem. When do we review this again?
Well, I don't
Whatever you
agree with
want.
that, I'm sorry, Ed,
Okay, that's fine. Everybody's got an opinion.
Well, I think Ralph
What do you
voted
think?
no.
I'm fine leaving it in.
I think we got a consensus to leave it in.
All right, we're gonna leave it in. Then the final part of the sign code there is the variance provisions, where it, it allows a variance for extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, you put a lot of verbiage in here, and then you finally get down to the very last C, and then you tell us it can't be for the self-imposed condition, so effectively you can't do it. You should have put that at the beginning.
Yeah, something like that, yeah, something like this. But this might be where someone would walk in and say, we're blocked by all the trees that are down the street, and no one can see our sign, so we need a variance, and that might be justified to allow some movement or change in height or sign or size or something.
Yeah, they said it had to be that high to be able to sit on the freeway when they weren't high enough.
That's how it
Okay.
is everywhere for life, so. You go by that.
I'm gonna assume we've got a good draft to go forward with there. Okay. The next section is on fencing and screening. I'm hoping just for tonight, it's now almost 7, we'll probably take a break in just a moment. I think we could finish chapter 3 and start digging into chapter 4, which is all the process stuff. In terms of how you actually administer this code, in terms of hearing processes and that kind of stuff. So,
One of the things Jake brought up is that we have chapters and articles.
yep.
Is that significant?
Yeah, there's 4 articles, because each article is a really broad topic. The first one's all about how do you administer the code, it establishes the definitions and all that kind of thing. The second article is the zoning, where it has all the zones and what goes in each zone, that kind of thing.
Here's where the question comes up that Jake brought up. We agree with that, but you've labeled it as a chapter, not an article.
At the top of this?
Yes, at the top of number 2, look at 2.203.05, it's chapter 2, zones and zoning regulations. That's where our confusion lies.
Okay, well, I'm looking at the one we're looking at right now, and it says at the top, Article 3, development requirement.
Exactly, you've got articles for 3 and 4, but chapters for 1 and 2.
Well, that needs to be fixed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jake, once again, thank you.
Thank you, Jake.
Good job, Jake.
No, he kept trying to explain it, and he wasn't explaining the
I'm
the
suitably
question we were
chastised.
asking.
Yeah, okay, got it. We
Carry
fixed
on.
that. Before we get to fencing, do you want to bring up your ideas, or should we take a break, or what do you want to do?
I don't care, this shouldn't take long.
Sure, let's do you.
So I want to go back to page, chapter 2,
Oh, you did.
2.104.06. It's the medium density
What page are
zone.
you on?
It doesn't have a page.
What,
11-10.
2?
2-10. So I know on the low density, we put in the 80-foot minimum minimum width, but on the medium density, we put 60. And.
What page is it?
It's on 1111.
1110.
Well,
So right now, we're at 80, and with 60, that's going to make the lot really long and narrow.
Sixty's a very normal lot width in most communities for single-family zoning.
But they're 5,000 square foot lots, and we have 10, and right now we have 80, so,
Okay. Up to you.
You're at the 3-to-1 though, Connie, so that will limit your depth.
so,
It can't be more than 3 times the width, so you wouldn't have a real.
okay.
Yeah, no bowling alleys. You know,
Okay,
long
I
and
see
skinny.
what you're saying.
Right.
So then that is okay? Because right
Well,
now,
but-
right
but-
now, we're at 80, so
But
that's,
somebody get their calculator, if it's 60 by 180, we don't have 10,000 feet, I don't believe.
No, it's only required to be 7.
Actually, it is 10,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we left it at 10,000 in the low-density zone.
okay, so that was.
Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm that. And then I wanted to go back to page 22, where our driveway width is 24 feet. We had a long discussion about that, and this still says that. So I think what we kind of talked about was minimum of 24, and then these lots that are like 80 to 100 foot wide, if we made the driveway no wider than 50% of the lot width in the front, then that would still leave at least 2 car parking spots out front. And if they had an RV slot, they'd have 4 slots in the front on the driveway. Of course, everybody doesn't park in their garage, but, I don't know.
Yeah,
This was a hot topic for me. I wanted
Right.
to get that fixed.
We have the notes for what you said, and so when the next draft comes out, all that'll be reflected.
Okay, all right.
So
That
I'll
was
make
all
sure
I
I've
had.
got that. All right, that's it?
That was all I had
Wow, okay.
for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to take a break or move
Sure,
on?
let's take a 5-minute break.
Quickly, before we start back in, I just wanted to make the planning commission aware, we need to make do reappointments. And one of the things that we have noticed, so when the planning commission was originally established by the city, the ordinances established it stated that there would be 9 positions and that they drew lots. And that there would be 3 people initially for 1 year, 3 for 2, 3 for 3. So you would have 3 people every year coming up for reappointment. The city, for maybe the first year, followed that. So what happens is essentially they should have been assigned a number. So everyone should have had a number. So you had like 1 through 3, 4 through 6, and 7 through 9 in those positions. So when someone left and someone new came in, they would fill out the rest of that term and then be eligible for a new 3 term. That has not occurred. So we went back to say, okay, can we try to figure out from when that occurred, who should be in which positions? Because last year, we appointed 5 people, reappointed 5 people to the planning commission. There's 4 people who are 3 years past that should be reappointed this year. So we need to find some way to address it. So what we discussed, talking with Forrest and trying to get, so we get back online, we have a staff report that we're going to council tomorrow night, asking to reappoint all of the planning commission members, all 9 to it, and then go back again and actually draw the lots at the next meeting for a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year term. Everyone will be up for reappointments after that. So we can get back to having 3 people every year coming up for reappointments.
So then question, because I did my 3 years and I just got reappointed a year ago, so I could end up, instead of going 2 more years, I can end up with 1 more year?
You could, yes. But the problem is, the person that you actually did hadn't been reappointed for tenure, had been on tenure without being reappointed. So if you look at the position, you can't tell who was in which positions.
Okay.
And that was that in case is the problem, is what's happening. Anytime someone left and someone new came on, they automatically were given a 3-year term. So someone could have been actually only a year into where they should have been, and someone new came on, and then we had people that went 10 years plus and never were reappointed. So it's just, so everyone will be eligible to go up. That way it'll help us get back onto. Now, if someone says, hey, I'm willing to just take the 1 year, we don't need to draw, say, I'm willing to take this, this, and this. But we need to do some way to get it back on track so we only have 3 every year in January comes up for reappointment. So if you see that in the minutes, that's coming up tomorrow night. So everyone is going to get reappointed at this point, and we're going to reset the clock, and we'll be maintaining it based on the position. So you'll be in a position instead of that. So if someone were to resign, leave, or whatever, and we appoint someone new, they would fill out the remainder of that term versus automatically getting a new 3-year term. Unless it happened to be at the end of someone's term.
So I'll be eligible for renewal bonuses, is that what it?
No. Well, they will.
Get a pay raise.
New bonuses.
The renewal bonus will be the same as the bonus as your pay now.
There you go, there you go.
It's gonna be a 100% increase, actually.
Yeah. So we made the assumption that everyone's willing to continue, and that we will establish that, and then, so next year, what we would do is whoever gets the 1 year, they would be up for a 3-year appointment next year. And then 2 years, we'll be reappointing those that have a 2 year and then 3 years. So
My question is, how I came on board. Why the hell
Makes
did I
sense.
I did that.
If you have any questions, go
I
ahead.
finished a term and then I.
Would it be
got
easier if we
reappointed.
said we don't care?
So,
Well, if you don't care, we'll just draw lots.
that's fine.
If we have someone that says, hey, I'm going to just take one of the 1 year, then we'll assign you one of the one and have others.
Or,
Regardless, we need to draw.
we used to be, once you got on, you had to die to get off.
You ready, John? John, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's get going then.
Let's look at fencing, which we already did to a great degree, but I just want to hit a couple of questions. 3.107, which. 39, okay. Since I'm putting in notes here, it throws my numbering off. 39, thank you. Probably the big question, because we already went through that front yard requirement and all that stuff, and so we've got that covered quite well. A question has to do with hedges. If you're requiring a fence, or if a fence is required around a commercial property or whatever, actually a fence even, the question is really, is a hedge a fence? Because a lot of jurisdictions, really in a chapter like this, talk about fence, wall, and hedge. And a hedge, as long as it meets the same height requirements or is planted so as to achieve the same height and opacity requirements within 3 years of planting or something like that, can be called, or can replace a fence. But this draft doesn't mention hedges, so I just wanted to ask if you had feelings about that.
Some of those arborvitae can get pretty tall.
I mean, they can make great fences, no doubt.
I don't understand why.
Okay, I'm gonna include, I'm gonna make it fence, wall, and hedge in here with some standard, and we'll see how it plays out.
So then the hedges would have to be no taller than 6 feet.
But
If they
I'm
were,
opposed
if
to
they
that.
were a perimeter fence, maybe if they're perimeter, but if it's inside their property,
No, we don't care about that.
yeah.
What if it's a hedge and it's across the back property line? Well, we would limit a fence to 6 feet. Would you limit a hedge to 6 feet?
Well, that's what I want to know about my 10-foot tree fence.
Yeah.
Saying.
Well, then you're gonna get into trouble, what is a hedge?
Yeah.
Once again, it becomes an enforcement
Well,
issue too.
I've
Yeah,
got
well, who's
Leland,
gonna,
Leland cypress behind my house that get 20, 30 feet, and you can trim them into a hedge. You run into problems there.
My problem with them is they start dying, and you see it all the time. where you have a long line of them, and then you have 2 or 3 or 4 dead ones, and that looks unsightly, and for me, I'd rather have a fence,
I think it looks much better than my neighbor that spray stained his fence and the stain all ran all the way down onto the sidewalk.
Well, and some people
I
use it
contend
as a
my
sound
tree fence
barrier,
looks
too.
better.
Yeah.
You know, if you're backed up to old
Exactly, I
Salem, you
contend.
kind of need that.
Well, we can put in the, you know, hedge could be any height except in these vision clearance type areas, but it has to be maintained. If it dies, it has to be replaced.
that'd be great.
Okay.
I guess that's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point, is that if we don't have something there that to say it needs to stay maintained.
Now, you're talking about the back fence?
Yeah, backer side.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we probably need to have.
What if the
some-
neighbor don't like it?
So, for example, our tennis court and the backstops for our. Back up to old Salem, I could use that as a sound barrier.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
Okay, make a point of that, because if I
The
choose.
public zone, all right, make sure.
Yeah,
Like I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Put my fence in,
6-foot backstop's not enough.
Yeah,
but then they wanted to put it in the neighborhood.
Who's pitching, yeah.
It didn't quite meet the way they wanted it, so they removed it. So I'm actually out of it.
got it, okay. Okay. Otherwise, I think this is all pretty straightforward unless one of you saw something in here that,
I have a question about, in the beginning, it says if a building permit is required
yeah.
due to height or material, where does it specify what materials need to be?
Yeah, thank you.
In the building code. So it's, anything higher than 6 requires it, but if the building code happens to require it for material, we would do that, but we don't control the building code, the county does in administering building permits.
So if the staff review, trying to think of a scenario here where we would discuss this. I mean,
No.
what material are we talking about that needs a conditional
I don't
or
know.
a? Because
I
you've
don't
got
know.
stone. I mean, are people limited without any interference by us to just regular fencing material or?
Yeah, we're not regulating it, but I do want to come back and ask a question about that. But, no, it says in here that, basically what it says is it'll have to get a building permit if it's required to get a building permit, which is anything more than 6 feet, or if there's any particular material that comes into play.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
And I really honestly don't know.
Maybe Janelle knows. Pardon?
Rock walls would be a building permit, it's over.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I mean, I'll say a wall is considered a fence, so that's one thing.
What a retaining wall, which you were discussing before.
Not necessarily, well, retaining walls up to a certain height, I think that's 4 feet actually, yeah. we can have a look at it. But also freestanding wall. Would require.
All right, let me go to the very first section under fencing here, right at the top of that, 3.107.01, permit required. Some cities require permits for fences and some don't. So it's saying, it's drafted saying that a permit is required.
Well, that's
Don't like it.
because it was changed and that's how the crossouts happened. And no, the original code did not have a building permit, but we were having it slammed down our throats that that's what we needed. They all needed to be looked at.
Well, this was, yeah, so this is saying that a person would walk in the door here and get some kind of fence permit, whether you needed a building permit or
That's
not. but
not
they
part
needed a
of
fence
our
permit.
original code. That was inserted without being voted on.
Okay, so the question is, you want to do that?
No.
Not very many jurisdictions do, and this is all the more reason to have a
And it wouldn't take long for the local fencing guys to know what to do.
Yeah, so you guys talk about that. Actually, my wife just called me 3 times in a row, which is a sign she needs to talk to me.
Yes.
Hang on just a second.
Take a break.
We'll call her, we'll have to come get you to the hospital.
Yeah, I didn't come tonight.
Just push it.
Just put,
No, are you volunteering?
No,
Well,
well, I could, but
Louis wants to come back, but I don't hold his talk at hand. We're trying to work with the culinary school because they just opened back up. So the Kerns are going to work with them. We have 2 culinary students.
and they'll be,
We have 2 ex-culinary students, one that's in business and the other girl works for us down there as a waitress part-time. So they're going to help guide us.
Do you have a restaurant?
No, the Eagles was having some difficulties, so I became a trustee. I wanted to be able to building it of it. There need to-
Oh, okay.
We're in the process of getting the charter act.
So there's
I didn't see that place.
Yeah,
All right. Sorry about that.
great sound barriers.
Milk and bread, huh?
No, she actually was lost, couldn't find City Hall. And she's driving the car, so hopefully she shows up. All right, so you came to conclusions about fences, walls, hedges, and all that stuff? Whether you want to permit?
Yes, we don't.
No, for me.
Good call.
I think we all argued hard against that when it got put in there anyway.
Well, we got standards. That's enforceable.
Okay, so that covers basically the fencing stuff. And that covers then almost all of the development standards that are kind of specific on signs and parking and all that stuff. We've gone through that. And now we're moving into the part of this that deals with land divisions. So,
I have one thing back on
Please.
page 41, talking about the site obscuring
Mhm.
fences where you can do the slats.
yep,
When those slats get broken and crappy, we have nothing in here to say they need to maintain them. But what, it says retain their attractiveness with nominal. What is
yeah, that's the
that?
way they're designed, is to retain their attractiveness. But if they do fall into disrepair, there's nothing in here that says they have to maintain it. And can I add that? Certainly.
I don't know, I mean, that's just something that bugs me when I see.
That type of enforcement, I think, you have these wooden fences that look terrible because they're not stained or what, I mean, I think you have all sorts of issues when people have the free will to do whatever they want,
Yeah.
or not do, not keep up. I just think, how many times do we want Jake or Kevin or
But these are
Jim to
fences,
go out and
these are
say-
fences specifically for site obstruction.
Site obscuring, so when it starts breaking down, it's no longer site obscuring. I guess that's my point. So, I just made a note that the slats are messy, I don't really like them.
I think it would make some sense to just add a provision here to say that fences will be maintained in good condition in perpetuity. And if that, we have a circumstance where that isn't met, then easily we can go out and deal with code enforcement in a case like that.
What says nominal maintenance?
Well, that's more saying it's of such design and material that will retain its attractiveness with nominal maintenance. So it's
Doesn't
it's
say
really a
that.
standard for when you
Most of
put
that
it
stuff
in.
is dyed to start with. I mean, it has some color in it, but when they get broken up,
Yep, that's the real issue. So I'm just added, fencing shall be maintained in good condition. Or so, you know, and that way we can enforce it if it becomes a problem. Okay?
yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry, John, I hate being that. You say we can enforce it, but what do we enforce? How do we enforce it?
Well, if it's
I mean,
not,
what's our hammer over
oh, there's an enforcement procedure.
them? Is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a singular enforcement
Is it
section.
such
that goes in the
as,
entire
if they
code.
don't do it, we'll go out and do it, and then we lien their property?
Could be, or we fine them.
Okay.
And you're only adding it to the side of security fences, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, land divisions, 3.108. This is
What page are we?
quite standard language. So what page is that? That's probably about 43? Okay. So remember, there's two kinds of land divisions. There is a partition and a subdivision. Partition is 3 or fewer. Subdivisions, excuse me, 3 or fewer lots, and a subdivision is more. And this chapter talks about the basic design standards. It doesn't talk about density or dimensions, because that's covered in each individual zone. But this covers kind of that whole process of how a subdivision is designed and laid out. The code that's here is essentially what you have now. Just kind of, let's hit some highlights in it, which says everything has to meet the minimum lot area, depth and width. I need more water. Let's steal Matt's water. There's one right here. I'll steal Matt's, you know, he didn't show up. So. Thank you, sir.
I don't think that is our code. I
I'm missing
understood
something
that
here.
our code included, if it's a flag lot, it included the road,
Mm-hmm.
depending on who owned the road, right?
Yeah, this is our draft that we're suggesting to you. It's based on the existing code, but I think it gets at some of those standards. So let's look at those when we get to it. And no, so that's under minimum lot area. It says access easements or the access strip of a flag lot is not included in calculation of the lot. Which means even though it's part of the deeded lot and it might add 1,000 square feet to the lot, if it's the 20-foot wide driveway space, you don't count that for lot area. Meaning
Thank you.
the bulk of the lot still has to be big to meet the minimum 10,000 square
That's
foot
not how
standard.
we've been doing it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we should do it one way or the other, I'm just saying that's not how we've been doing it. So,
This is time for you to decide if you want to propose it that way.
I'm okay with it.
I want it to stay that way, certainly. I don't like these 8,000 square foot lots that have 2,000 feet they can't touch.
Okay?
I have another question here on C access. It said everybody's gonna have a minimum 40 feet frontage on an existing or proposed public street. I thought we were at 25 feet on all of our.
That's
cul-de-sacs.
driveway.
No. No, the property has to abut
The front end.
the frontage road by 25 feet, not 40.
I'm not saying.
That's
we're
for the
doing it
Existing
wrong.
code.
Yeah, it's for the cul-de-sac type.
Well, but it is, but it's
Where the
saying
front
here that
comes
the
in real
minimum.
shallow, yeah.
Right, but it's saying here the minimum is 40.
Mhm.
We've used that 25-foot frontage as an argument in the past.
Sure, if you
I'm
want
sure
to.
that it's there.
Because your minimum lot width is still going to be the minimum lot width of 60 or 80 feet,
Right.
depending on the zone. It's just a matter of how much frontage is it going to have.
Some of our
Not really,
cul-de-sac
dude.
lots are only 25 feet, they can barely get a driveway in there.
Okay, so what do you want to do?
We have a couple of those right now, I call them a bulb end.
It is
And
great.
they're on the corner of Obsidian and Anthony. There are 2 lots. So, but they're on half-acre lots.
Yeah.
That's your
But-
lot.
Yes.
Well, that's how he knows
I was
it.
He knows all about it.
But also the flag lots are 25 feet wide where they abut a city street. I haven't read further down this. I stopped when I saw the 40 feet, maybe you're covering it.
Yeah,
but-
the whole entrance is back.
Yeah, so this
That's
allows
fine.
the flag lot, but it doesn't speak to on the outside of a corner or on a cul-de-sac.
Well, it doesn't allow the flag lots the way they're being built here now, where we have a 25-foot frontage to the public road.
Yeah, this just says, they can be accessed by a private street, but it doesn't indicate
Well, it says we
the
have
frontage requirement on it.
Well, it says a minimum 40 feet of frontage.
Yeah, so if you go down to D, it talks about flag lots. It says the access strip should be a minimum 20 feet in width
Okay,
in D.
okay.
What
I thought
about,
we didn't want flag lots.
what about number B there? The lot width and depth?
Yep.
What's the reasoning besides the ratio there?
Well, this is pretty standard,
Which one are you on, Steve?
B?
B. This is a pretty standard language in codes that basically tells a designer that they can't build, you know, a narrow lot that's a quarter mile long or whatever it is, or 800 feet. It really requires a ratio that makes it a little more squarer.
And this kind of makes that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just curious why that.
That's what that's about. Well, let's talk about that 25-foot minimum. Well, we could change that 40 to 25, or we could say 25 applies when you have a curve radius that you're fronting, which would be an outside of a curve or on a cul-de-sac. Do you have any sense? I think it makes sense definitely to acknowledge that there are lots that'll be needing 25 feet.
So why put in 40 feet? What are we trying to accomplish with that 40 feet?
40 feet just makes sure that lots are fronting on the street. It helps establish that. Yeah, I hear you.
So John, right now you have flag lots that, and then you address the amount of development, you talk about 20 feet on those.
Mm-hmm. For the flags, yes.
I thought we decided the fire department wanted 25 feet on that. Firemen.
Yeah, that would
You know, the way this was written, it basically is saying even on a cul-de-sac, you have to have 40 feet of frontage.
That doesn't work on the two cul-de-sacs on my block.
Should we lower that to 25 then?
I think so.
Works for me. All right, just go with that. And then the 25 feet on a flag lot as opposed to 20.
Well, that goes back to everything. It's gonna have 25 feet of frontage. Just make it one simple,
Yeah,
rather than coming up with 40 here and 25 there and 20 somewhere else.
I think that's a great idea.
Well, that's the way it is right now. We don't always hold to it, but that's,
okay. Got it. You know, the next provisions are all quite straightforward. Through lots, it talks about lots that have double frontage, and we try to avoid them if possible. Lot sidelines basically says when you're laying out a subdivision, you try to make your side lot lines perpendicular to the street, so you don't have cockeyed lots, basically. Utility easements are provided on all lot areas necessary to accommodate public utilities. So those are there. In the next part, you can just see, these are guidance, basically. These are just, and this is really standard language in codes. It's guidance that's given to whomever's designing the subdivision for what you expect this to look like. Like under A, general there, length, width, and shape of blocks shall be designed with regard to providing adequate building sites for whatever's gonna happen there. And then the next one, sizes, blocks not exceed 1,000 feet between street lines with a preferred length of 500 feet, which gets into that interesting discussion we had earlier about 600 feet.
It's in, you got,
Okay.
you got the wrong.
But that's not arterials,
Oh, yeah.
and this is in neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm, okay. All right. Traffic circulation and connectivity basically are saying that when you design a subdivision, it needs to tie in to what's around it. Even if there's no development on the adjacent property, you still tie in so that when development occurs, projects flow into and out of each other. Collector and arterial connections, there's the 600 feet there. Yeah, 600 feet. Pedestrian, bicycle, meet those standards. Okay, so those are the basic standards for laying out a subdivision. It's just guidance. It's the same thing here under partition, 3 or fewer. Number 2, under street frontage improvements, and Janelle, you may have comments on this as well. It says that if you're doing a partition, doesn't have a street improvement out front, and the partition is more than 250 feet in length, that you do the street improvement. If it's less than 250 feet, you don't have to do the street improvement, but you sign a non-remonstrance agreement saying when the council says it's time to build it, that you build it, and that runs with the land over time. This is a policy decision that's pretty important. Some jurisdictions say flat out, you do the street improvement, because that's the only way you ultimately get them. That creates the problem that some jurisdictions worry about, is that you end up having a piece of sidewalk that's 60 feet long and it doesn't connect to anything. And it can be real hard to establish grade, especially for drainage, if you don't have a continuous system.
This shouldn't be up to us, this should be left to staff.
Well, we need to draw a line somewhere, and so 250 feet is not an uncommon number to use to do that. I don't know, you looked at that.
Well, it's come up, so I think the policy decision part of this is on a partition, do you require, first doing the partition, say you have something like we recently had on Bain, where they have long skinny streets, and on a partition, to require them to put in street improvements along there, it would be hugely expensive for someone just wanting to partition their land and build another residence on it. In addition, on that street, and we don't have too many streets like this, but we have a few over there, I wouldn't know what to tell them to build exactly, because the street's not to any standard that we would want it to be.
Well, that's kind of my point, and that exceeds the 250-foot minimum there, I believe.
Right.
But that should be up to you guys to decide, not us. And it shouldn't be written that they have to do it.
That's the policy question, you know, and so we can waive it, but I think there ought to be a non-remonstrance agreement.
Yeah, we did on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And if that's the case, then in here, we probably don't even want 2 and 3. I mean, we rewrite that, but eliminate the 250-foot standard.
Well, I think so. I think if this were in force, those folks wouldn't have been able to do that. That lady wouldn't have been able to stay on her property. We don't want to put people out there.
But the thing is that shouldn't they be paying for those utilities and that?
Well, they still need to do that, all the
They
utilities.
have to do the
Utilities,
utilities.
but the street improvements, I mean, should the city be on the hook for that money?
And this is a policy.
They always
in the
have.
city Because of the arguments we made in the past, that, I use a water, for example, talking about that. The city put in infrastructure for the rest of the city, and now to require these property owners to pay for it when none of the rest of the city had to, is burdensome on the property owners. I'm not saying that at some point the city doesn't have to make that decision and do it anyway, but that's been the discussion here in the
Where-
past.
With the exception, what we're talking about is where there was existing residents that you brought the water.
Yeah, if someone were to propose a new subdivision, that's a different thing. where we
Totally
put
different.
Conditions where they have to improve the roads that are needed, whatever, but this is, yeah, the existing residences, partitions, you're in above the area. What's reasonable to require someone to make a petition versus full-on subdivision?
So is that how other cities do it?
Connie, on the non-remonstrance agreement, so if the city decides later that we come in and we decide that, okay, there's been enough take place, we need to upgrade this street. Under the non-remonstrance agreement, that property owner will be subject to paying that street frontage fee at that point for that improvement.
Okay.
So
And
the
that
city
runs
will-
with the land. So it could be 20 years from now and a third owner. Still be
So that's for bare land if somebody's gonna build there, or?
It's now associated with that piece of property that did a partition now. So whether someone built a house or not, doesn't matter if the city decides to go in and improve that street. and assess all the owners, property owners, for a portion of it, then that person has already signed an agreement in front of the land saying that they won't protest that. Now, others who are existing and don't have that because they don't have this agreement, they can protest the idea of the city upgrading and charging them. But if they sign this agreement, they can't, they have to just go ahead and pay it.
Like on Woods Road,
Like that one's road.
I'm not paying for sidewalks.
What about if you move into your
Huh?
daughter's what about when you go in your daughter's backyard?
Take a swim back.
Oh, then she has to do it.
You don't live there out here. You don't live where I live.
I thought she was going to and put you in the back.
Oh, no, I'm moving into her place. I'm moving into her place.
Okay.
All right, the next section is the basic improvement requirements, and this talks about the public improvements that are built as part of a subdivision, where you do the frontage improvements for the streets, and you have to build surface drainage, stormwater, sanitary, water system, sidewalks, street lights, street signs, et cetera, et cetera. It just lays out that basic requirement that all projects have to put in the improvements that are necessary.
What provision do you have in the instance when you have wetlands and it's been approved and DSL says you will not go through there? I mean, you've got to have some provision for flexibility, because we're going to run into that.
That's why I think you're gonna find us always asking for a wetland determination or delineation as part of an application process, rather than having it show up later.
So there is flexibility, and because laws are changing, not just with us, but
Yeah. Well, I'd much rather tell an applicant that we have a suspicion that there might be wetlands on a property and have them check it out before we ever get into an application.
Yeah, first thing.
So they can take it into account in terms of how they design it and also how it pencils. They work on it.
in essence, ask for a variance or,
No, well, if there's
No, wait,
wetlands on a
yes.
property, they certainly can design something that takes those into account. One of the things, you don't want to do planned developments, but it's not uncommon if you have a large property, it's got wetlands on it, you might say that the wetlands would be kept in the ownership of an owners association or something like that, but you would allow the density that's being used by that to go into the balance of the project. So if you could do 40 homes without the wetlands, you could still do 40 homes even though you're setting 4 or 5 acres aside or space for homes or whatever instead, density. But you said you don't want to do planned developments. So what we really want to do is just tell designers, developers that they have to take into account those wetlands and do that which is necessary, required by DSL, the Corps of Engineers, for protecting those wetlands. And they just have to deal with that. It's just a net loss to them in terms of buildable land.
Well, or pay the state enough and now it's not a wetland.
well, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, that's
Basically it though.
And the house sinks.
Yeah, it's, wetlands are one of those things that the federal government is more than happy to set strict standards and push them down to city governments to administer and property owners to put up with.
And they go check the land after it's rain gauge straight days.
Yeah, exactly. And the people that get, when they get mad at us. They don't get mad at, the feds. So it's great. Just like floodplains. Okay.
Can we go back to something? Page 44, this flag lot, I highlighted some stuff on that.
Okay.
So access strip may be an easement over the front lot or maybe a portion of the rear lot.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for me, you're running utilities on someone else's property if you give it to the guy that in the front. And I guess I really would like to see us say that the strip is the guy in back's property.
So no easements.
No easements. but that's me.
I get what she's saying.
I don't actually have a problem either way. I understand the concern about being on the road, somebody needs to do something and there could be argument between property owners. If it's recorded with the land, if it goes with the land, I haven't personally seen a problem with that, but that doesn't mean there would be. And I don't know if that's, that concern that I've heard a few times is based on something that's happened in the past, or just a concern that something could happen. So I don't, with the, just how it's functions and it's set up, I have not seen a problem with it. Even Albany does it too, I've talked to them about it, but that doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do.
I guess I was just trying to be proactive, that takes it away that. It just totally takes it away. And then you don't have property owners getting upset at each other for any reason.
I see people unaware of their easements for sewer lines, public sewer, stormwater, that they get upset about much more than something like this, where there's a driveway where they're aware of it.
Yeah.
So,
They wouldn't look any different, though.
No, it wouldn't look any different. All I'm saying is that if you have that strip of land belong to the guy in the front, he could be nasty and block it or do whatever he wants to it. And you know, just if it's owned by the guy who is accessing the driveway and his utilities are actually on that driveway, then you don't have issues. Because the guy in the front, he's gonna have his driveway probably coming off the road, and his utilities are gonna be coming off the road. So they're two separate things. That's,
You know I don't like the access easements, but if you don't allow them, you can't have the two lots behind the front house. Because somebody's gonna have to have easement there. Or you're gonna
That's
have
true.
two separate flag lots with two separate driveways.
which I don't
We
like
won't.
that either.
I
We
love
don't
them
like
next
that.
door to me.
Yeah, I don't like that.
And I think it's wonderful because I've been 100 feet before the next house.
I don't know.
I think
just-
Janelle's point is solid in that, you know, we just don't have problems that come up over it. And you're right, I mean, it's, people, they own it, but there's an easement, and, you know, who manages that and that kind of thing, but those end up being kind of civil issues that are resolved between property owners. Just in my experience, these really don't turn out to be an issue.
Okay.
I'd also add, kind of to Dennis's point with the, you know, we have other parts of our code that try to limit access points off of roads, and the only way you can do that is with an easement. So different parts of our code would be fighting against each other if we tried to not allow easements.
Okay, all right.
I mean, isn't it something like when the developer comes to present this subdivision and we see these things, can we, I mean, it seems like if I had a preference, I might ask, is there any way that could be the rear guy or something like that, you know?
You can ask.
And maybe it's,
That's what the building department should be suggesting when you take it in,
Yeah,
if it's not
when they
right.
come with
Correct?
When they
The
come
building-
to us with something that's
Or us.
allowed in the code, we can't
Or
say
you,
no.
that you could, when they bring in their
Can't force
initial
it.
plans, you can look and say, oh, that's not gonna work, or something like that.
no, just as a matter of preference, Dennis. You know.
No, I understand, it's just,
We couldn't enforce it for sure.
no, if we
Maybe,
allow it.
maybe it was 6 one, half does the other.
No, we had a track that we just had that same discussion on 6 months ago.
And I didn't like, there was like 4 or 5 lots there that were the same kind of thing.
But it does limit the big lot, putting 2 houses back in the back. He would have to have an access easement in order to get to both of them.
Well, and the problem on one of them was the easement wasn't owned by the people in the back at all. It was owned by the 2 people. Yeah, it was nuts.
You ready to go on?
Sorry.
Okay.
Oh. One more thing real quick.
I
I just
tried.
happened to think about it. If I don't ask it, I'll forget. Is there any ordinance or requirements for, especially probably new subdivisions for new roads where they can't be cut for an X amount of time? For utility guys coming in?
That's design standards, and we have provides the standard for that. We don't have an absolute no cutting of any new road in a certain period of time, but we have, in that permit built in significant deterrence in the form of cost, or requirements to repave.
So
So
you're
if
making-
someone needs to cut a road, they may have to repave a whole lane.
So you're gonna make them at least think about it ahead of time instead of, oh, we forgot, now we gotta cut it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, we're trying to limit that.
Okay, cool.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say.
Uh-huh.
It was back on the wetlands, to Ed's question, or maybe for me to clarify. Would presence of wetlands on a site be considered a site constraint that could qualify for a variance? I think maybe that's where my real, it's perhaps we might require a through street in some location, but there are wetlands there that are not, for whatever reason, easily mitigated, or whatever. Is there any, I think that's something that we run into a little bit, or is it an absolute no? You have to do whatever is required for mitigation, even if it's a 10-to-1 or something, to make this work. Does that make sense?
Well, that's absolutely a case for a variance. That meets all the criteria of a variance.
Should. It's, that's why we have variances, because the code can't cover all circumstances. Okay.
Did you
Well,
find a puddle on
let's,
your lot down there?
Well, I found puddles all over my lots down there.
Improvement requirements for subdivision, 3.10806. Let's see, we just went through that. We require all the right stuff. We're down to improvement procedures, 3.108.07. Please.
On the 3.1080610, street tree planting, not referred to subdivider, but the planting shall be according to city requirements. This is something I'd like to make sure we've got the planning commission's direction on street trees, because it's been, they're in our code right now, street tree or a yard tree, and we sort of have standards around them. And at some point in the past, it was decided we don't want street trees. We're telling developers no street trees because of maintenance. Several, I don't know, years ago. But perhaps we do want street trees in the city.
We're losing a lot of trees, and with some of the other stuff that's coming out with water quality things and stuff, we may want to see that.
Many jurisdictions require 2 street trees per lot. And the cities adopt standards for those street trees of species and type that don't break up sidewalks and curbs and that kind of thing.
Which we have.
Which is what we have now.
Well, we don't actually have it.
We have it, we can put it in code.
We have a list.
It says we have a list.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we certainly have sidewalks that are listed.
We now have City of Albany's list that I got from them. That would be a good start. And we might, if we need to look at our planter strip widths, if we're gonna put trees on, make sure they're big
Well,
enough.
yeah, that's
but-
what I was just thinking, was some of those planter strips, like in Becker Ridge, are really narrow.
Right.
To put a tree on that, you're asking for trouble.
And that has to be in the yard to see it all.
And that's fine.
So the design standards can be written to make it work. Is that our street trees something the city wants to have?
You look at our city anymore, the number of large trees that we've lost, we've become kind of a native city. You know, you drive through the subdivisions and stuff, and look at, we're treeless. And I think there may be some issues in the future as far as some of these maybe coming down the pipe from federal water standards and stuff.
Well, I wouldn't want to say that we don't allow them, because we might have to do something more with vegetation. But I think previously it was written that street tree or a tree in the front yard, but I don't think anyone ever really knew that. We may have that in places, but no one was checking to look at the street tree because they're one in the front yard.
Can I ask you a quick one about just directly above that, curb cuts and driveways are gonna be cut according to city standards? What are those city standards? You know my feelings on it.
Well, we're having that discussion around driveway width, right? Is that what you're talking about, or?
You know, how they're cutting out the curbs,
how they're
cutting,
cutting out.
cutting through the middle of a gutter.
Yeah, I need to look back at the details and specs.
Okay, that's fine, carry on.
And this is speaking to the, I believe, the subdividers have to cut in the curb cuts, those can be cut in later by the builder.
Right, but it says it has to be done according to city standards, and that's where my question was.
May I bring up another question? So under that, on page 47, so forward to now, I guess it's something ask you about and with John. Is that instead of subdivision, would number 4 apply to one or two particular lots that are not grading correctly, such as what we're dealing with right now? Because I didn't see 4, and then it goes over to 10, it says the city attorney, performance bond, rather, it's acceptable to the city attorney. But would that apply to if a lot, before signing off, it's not, have good drainage, that individual lot? I guess what I'm unclear of, is this lot, can this be lot specific, or is it the entire subdivision?
We have to review and approve the drainage plan for the whole subdivision. But it probably doesn't get onto an individual property,
Well,
or does it?
well, this, I think, is about the whole subdivision.
Right.
For the individual property, we, at the building permit level, they have to put a site plan, and they're supposed to show grading, we're still working on getting there, grading, drainage, but it's usually very basic. But, and then we have the inspection, so I know you're getting at, of course. I'm not sure that
This may not apply to that, this is more the entire subdivision.
yeah, and I think that, I mean, this is really about the overall drainage design, and the whole overall drainage design may work, and you might still have localized issue on the lot.
Okay.
That's the whole building.
In our situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So who has responsibility for the individual lot drainage? Is that the builder?
That's reviewed with the building permit. What about the street trees? It says the city doesn't require them, but if a developer puts them in, that's fine. The question is, as Kevin brings up, do you want to require them with new construction?
I say no. But if you do, you gotta put the right tree.
Oh, yeah. Right tree in the right place.
If we don't require them, we won't have them.
Right. Oh, that-
Appraisers will,
That's true.
yeah, appraisers will tell you that over
Yeah, they'll
time,
do
it
the
can add
mill,
about
yeah.
20% of the, value to a house, to be in a leafy neighborhood.
Too bad.
Adds value. Adds value to whole neighborhoods by doing it. I'm an advocate, I'll tell you.
If these are put up, are you talking about them being put in the median strip?
Yeah.
So then, though, will the city be willing to accept responsibility when the sidewalks begin to buckle up? I mean, that's gonna be an issue.
That's why we have
I mean, this is but I got a lot of
Yeah,
stuff.
okay, but
Yeah.
we planted, on properties I have in Albany, I planted those listed trees that work, and they still buckle.
Then you've got a problem.
Yeah, but I want us to just be
I just
aware,
like
of
to
that. I
see it
think it
on
is
the
a good
screen.
communication for it, it's just.
I thought in Albany, the owner was responsible for
It
the
is,
sidewalks.
it is.
The sidewalk issues I've seen in this town have not been caused by trees. And I could be wrong about that in some areas, but I have, as I walk around, I've seen a number of issues which the city has painted, and those are construction-related issues, more so than a tree issue, I think.
It's more of a moisture issue
Yeah.
when the water, when we have a dry summer, you're gonna see it buckle anywhere. So it's not a construction, but it does happen.
But, well, to get back to, so it is the individual responsibility, but some properties I've got on Ellsworth Street, they came through and they pulled them all out and redid them all on their own, because they required us to plant them 25 years ago, and they said that they had to plant the wrong trees.
So Albany made a change, and I don't know how long ago it was, and how they handled this. And now the city has taken over, you probably know what it was, all the ownership and maintenance of street trees. But we haven't done that.
Actually, I've got
I don't know that we.
Of the tree itself, but not if it causes damage.
If we do street trees, I mean, the reason why they have our maintenance is, I mean, you gotta keep them trimmed, right, above the sidewalks or
Because
above
they're
the
gonna be in
streets.
your way
and,
all the time.
you
If
know,
they're on the curb, they need to be on
enforcement
the
or-
road.
But the trade-off is not having any trees,
So are the cars too.
Listen to
You gotta stay away
Janelle,
any-
it's still, yeah. It's still their.
Street tree has some
the-
responsibility, you have to maintain it.
It does become an enforcement issue in the long run. You know,
You could regulate that a little bit if you have the width. I personally like trees, and anything I do is gonna require trees, but I understand the issues. I hate to have restrictions put on builders. This is kind of against less rules, less laws, but I personally like trees. But you could have the width, like Jim brought up, the narrow easement, you can't. But if you have a 5-foot utility strip with the right tree, I see a lot of people are putting rocks in there. Now, Millersburg soil is the worst soil you can build on, but once a tree gets established, we've been pretty lucky. Part of the reason is there's moisture underneath the concrete, and that's why the tree roots will, they'll lay there, because there's no moisture down there.
Yeah, wow.
So that's a sticky question. I'll always stick to trees if I have my way.
It's a
but-
beautification thing. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, it is. I've got 9 trees in my yard. My wife and I love trees. You know,
I mean, I don't like picking up the leaves, but I'm for trees.
that's just the
Just
front
don't
yard.
plant sweet.
Well, I'm hearing a bit of a sense of maybe doing a 2 trees per house kind of standard.
One street and one yard, or
No,
2
this-
trees?
these would be street trees out front.
How about corner lots?
Depends on the face, the width of your
I'd
property.
have one there.
Well, it's-
Still
I mean-
on the lawn.
Well, 1 per side because you still have your vision clearance area. I don't know.
About one.
Doesn't it have to be either or, either street or front yard for these areas that have, well, we have some areas that don't have anything, the sidewalks right on the curb.
Right, but this is for new construction. These are new
These are new
new subdivisions.
These are new construction, new subdivisions.
This would mean
Right
that
across from the
you would
park.
have planting strips.
The cul-de-sac right across from the park, sidewalks are on the curb.
You could, instead of
So
saying
it could be an
trees,
either or.
Yeah, two street trees or trees in the front
instead
yard.
of saying trees, though, I've seen some, what I call them flowering shrubs that kind of grow as a tree. There's some beautiful ones in my neighborhood that, and they're not a tree, but you could maybe rephrase instead of street trees, street beautification. I'm sure Janelle could come up with a better word than that.
well, I think the list of street trees that always got
Is that
asked.
the ones that
is
drop over
I
the
look at it, has
walls
some of
and
those flowering.
the sidewalk?
You know, I think that's.
Okay,
Well,
So
How
the
about,
list
how about
has-
2 trees on each,
Okay.
on each side?
I say
Yeah.
yes for street trees.
okay. Got it. We'll draft that up that way.
So, I'm sorry, just a quick question, so if we are going to do that, is the city then going to be responsible for the maintenance of?
Here goes the attorney.
Maintenance, okay, we're not now, but are we going to accept that down the road? So, is that? Okay, it's not the intent,
As long as
Is
there's
there
got
a-
verbiage in there that they, the
Is there
owners keep
ordinance?
them trimmed up.
It's not the other thing.
That's an enforcement.
Okay, so that doesn't change.
And then the enforcement of keeping them trimmed up would be conducive.
And that's still the case in Albany, it's still longer than the properties to maintain their heights.
Yeah.
That's, we get notice of our trees. City of
And, yeah, and if you notice, the ones that we drive out and around, a lot of those people have trimmed the trees up because they want their road clean next to the curb. So they've seen that we drive around them, so it's kind of a self-fixing problem in some cases.
Okay, the next section on improvement procedures, that's just real straightforward. Just saying that you gotta put all this stuff in, and the city has to review it and approve it before it goes in, inspect it and accept it. Because remember, these public improvements, the developer builds, but then the city ends up owning the street and the sewer and the water lines and that kind of thing. So they have to be built to city standards, and we have to buy off or inspect them before we would accept them for city ownership and maintenance. And this just lays all that out. Okay, any questions about that? It's your basic subdivision standards. Let's jump down then. Well, let's see, it's after 8. How long do you want to go? You all good?
Or you got. I mean, we could go forever, but
We could. Well, this,
I thought it was gonna get into 4 tonight.
we are about 60% through this chapter. So, and obviously, there's a lot of discussion. Maybe the rest of these will be pretty straightforward, so it's up to you, Chair.
what do you wanna do? You wanna pull it on or bail out?
Let's go until we have intense discussion, and then we'll probably stop. at 8:30.
Yeah, another 20.
We might be able to sail through this.
How about 8:30?
There you go. Perfect.
All right, yard and lot standards, these are very normal. It just basically says everyone's gonna have the right yards. It allows projections into yards, things like chimneys and bay windows and stuff like that, covers all that. Same thing on side yards. It says you can put decks and patios in the yards as long as they're not more than 3 feet in height. Above that, they still have to meet setbacks, but if they're less than 3 feet, they don't have to meet setbacks.
So does that include the chimneys have to meet the setbacks or not?
No, chimneys don't have to meet the setbacks.
Because that's different than what the county has, by the way. The county says any part of the structure has to meet the setbacks. We had a discussion on that earlier this week.
That's wrong, that's just wrong.
I came from Suzanne.
No, that means your bay windows and all that stuff would have to meet setbacks, and no, it's normal practice to allow those things to extend into the yard.
Not in civilization, it's not.
Yeah, wow, well, you guys are much more progressive than Albany.
That's the county.
Oh, the county, geez, okay. All right, 3.10906, vision clearance. You saw the illustration, basically, we talked about it a little bit, just said that within 10 feet of a driveway or 20 feet of a street intersection, you have to keep vegetation, fences, whatever, out of the vision clearance area. That's pretty straightforward. Any issues with any of that? See, if we go like this, we're just gonna whip right through this. All right, now we'll get into the stuff where we won't whip through them. Oh, the next one we will, planned unit development, 3.202. And you agreed this goes, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that's a light one.
Yeah, that seemed to be the consensus of the group before.
Until we're required to have stuff.
That just used up a whole bunch of pages we just got through. Manufactured dwelling parks. Here's standards for the manufactured dwelling parks. That are pretty straightforward. This is 3.203.02,
Page 59.
59 in your handle. These are straightforward. You will remember we took manufactured dwelling parks as allowed in the low-density zone and eliminated that. So these would only be allowed in the higher density zones, which means the vast majority of the city, you couldn't put in a manufactured housing park.
That's right, so only in this city, only down in that area at Knox Theater.
Yeah, where we're gonna put the higher density zoning down there. Okay, any issues with anything in that? This is pretty much what you have now, I think. The next section is 3.204. This is interesting. Manufactured homes on individual lots. State statute says quite clearly that a manufactured home that meets certain standards has to be allowed wherever a single-family home can go. You can't discriminate against them, so this covers the standards for that. It says manufactured homes are permitted in all zones in accordance with the following standards. A, has to be multi-sectional, have at least 1,000 square feet of gross floor area, has to meet the requirements for thermal, insulation and such. All the towing equipment has to be removed, it has to have a foundation, excavated and backfilled foundation. To meet building codes in the flood hazard area, and has to have all utilities, and then the last part, you can't put it on any site that's designated a historic site.
So you have the
Okay, now this is just
412
this is, oh, sorry.
Which is good, rather than 312.
Yeah, design compatibility down there. So this gets into those design things to help make the home comply. The 412 pitch is important to that. Has-
No, I
Yeah.
think this is just a typo, I'm sure. At the top of the page, it's 3.204, and then everything under it is 3.203.1.2.
That slap the secretary.
She's not here, is she still lost?
No, she's sitting in the parking lot. And she doesn't type, so,
Wish you could make it where they can transport wider manufactured homes. That way they can have overhangs on the roof.
yeah, that's right.
They can't, because they can't transport anything that way.
Yeah. Okay, so, under these standards, it talks about roofing, siding, you have to have a garage. So carports aren't allowed, and have to have the same off-street parking as, basically as a single-family home.
Can we call that a two-car garage
I was just thinking that too, should it be single car or
for a
double?
minimum?
If you wish.
This is new,
Yes.
is this
Yeah.
part new or old stuff?
Well, it's 1,000 square feet,
Pardon? I agree.
whatever.
Well, manufactured home just went in without a garage, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
Before I was gonna say.
two-car garage.
Is this new proposals, or is this?
Yeah, this
existing?
is new. You have
Okay.
some standards in the existing code that are, 1974 standards or
Well,
something.
manufactured home just went in with no garage, I was just curious if that was
Yeah.
under the old. Okay.
Right.
So what size lots? These are still the 10,000?
Yeah, yeah, these are exactly the same. Where it won't happen is if a subdivider imposes deed restrictions that don't allow manufactured homes. So this doesn't mean in your subdivision, if your CC&Rs prohibit manufactured homes, this would overrule that and you'd be able to put a manufactured home in. So yeah, you could definitely still have, the private deed restrictions applying to a subdivision, which can prohibit manufactured homes, just like it can prohibit bright red houses and whatever it is. That applies in that particular subdivision.
You can do that. I've been involved in that.
Okay? Next is home occupations. We talked about this before?
Yeah, we went.
Generally.
At length.
We've been there.
Yeah, we did. So, okay, so we've got those notes on that one. That's pretty straightforward.
Now, it's 2 people? Did we agree on the 2 people or 1 person?
2. So you can have an employee.
No more than 2 people shall be employed other than a member of the family.
Yeah.
So 3 people.
Well, yeah, it's a member of the family and 2 employees
And
from
2
the outside.
employees.
Can reside, how many employees can they have?
Well, it's just 2. So it could be the whole family, but you could have 2 outside employees that would come to the home for the purpose of employment.
I get it. That was, the wording was strange.
You discuss impact on parking and traffic, I'm assuming probably that is.
Yeah.
That raises the point of it.
We got into that with that, we'll just talk about it, the trucks, and that's on a cul-de-sac, and, yeah.
Well, that's how we came up with the limit of 2 people other than the residents.
Right, and there's no retail or anything like that. So this is,
Across the street.
say, a attorney planning consultant, work on their home, and they might have a secretary or an associate that would work with them. But no clients at that, so. So these are pretty innocuous generally. Okay, so we did go through that. So I think we've got that covered. Let's go on. Manufactured home trailer, vehicular sales service, and related uses. So this gets into your automotive-related uses and establishes some standards for them, saying things like the parking areas have to be paved, not gravel. Lots are screened from adjoining residential zone properties. Merchandise and supplies shall be stored within a building, so this gets at some of the issues that we might have with clutter and junk and stuff around some properties. Automobile service stations, you know, it clarifies you can have freestanding pumps and that kind of thing. And then those come in under the site design review process, as they always do, but this just establishes some standards for how those are designed and how you evaluate them when they come in. Residential accessory structures. This one, you know, I don't think this draft reflects it. I know we had a conversation about a large lot allowing large structures.
Proportionate to the size of the lot.
Yeah, so I want to make sure, I mean, I've got that in my written notes from before, but I'm gonna,
I don't think we ever really came to a conclusion of what we wanted.
My understanding would be if 1,000 square feet were 10, for
1,200 square feet.
then if you double that size, then it'd be 20,000.
So basically 10%.
That was my understanding.
10% of the lot size.
Is the
No, I
maximum.
thought we went to 1,200 square foot for
Well, maybe that
shops and subdivisions.
We did.
Yep,
Yeah.
with just administrative approval.
If that rings a bell. I know I've got it in the notes, but,
1,200 square feet.
yes.
In that table, what does the area coverage mean?
Of the yard,
Oh, well, that's a minimum standard. I mean, you either could be 200 to 600 square feet, but you could cover no more than 20 or 50% of the yard, like in a rear yard,
Or the,
of wherever it is. I mean, if it's a side yard, no more than 50% of it, if it's a rear yard, no more than 50% of that.
this is, okay, so this is separate from the lot coverage standard, because this, that would be the addition of all these pieces together, still has to meet the 50%.
Exactly. Yes.
Including.
Yeah, including the house, yeah. Okay. So I'll be rewriting all of this draft after we get through chapter 4 to reflect all the notes we've compiled on
They
this.
got multiple accessory structures and no limit on the number of them?
Okay, that's, well, there you go. That's why we're reviewing this. What do you
Guy's
think?
Got 25 acres, you know, say you can only have one outbuilding out there?
At a
You
small.
should be able to have 20,
Still have to comply with the area coverage.
yeah.
Right.
If he's got 20 acres, you can have a bunch of buildings.
Yep, you can have 4 Fred Meyer garden sheds if your lot's big enough.
Okay.
Okay. Multifamily. There's a question here. This is pretty, you know, this is minimal in terms of design standards. We could establish some more specific design standards on things like how many apartments in a single building, a little more on architectural design, that gives some constraints about how multifamily is designed and laid out, as opposed to everyone's fear of big barracks apartments, kind of complexes. Do you have some sense of whether you'd want to have standards like that, or they wide open? They come in for site design review, but, you know, that's not going to get into architecture and number of dwelling units and that kind of thing.
Well, Isn't this just talking about accessory units, this on the bottom of page 67?
Nope, now we're on to that 3.207.02 multifamily development.
Just a little behind.
So my question is, would you like to see some design standard ideas for multifamily projects?
Well, if we don't have anything, then they don't have anything, but they have
We
to,
have no way to turn down that, barracks. We have to have design standards for that, we have to. Well, let me rephrase it.
I agree.
My 2 cents says we have to.
I don't want barracks.
I'm hearing a bit of a concurrence in that.
Yeah, I don't want barracks.
Okay, so when I do the next draft, I'll have some standards in there for you to look at. Okay. Then, we get into special residential dwellings, of which there are a couple of them, accessory dwelling units.
Well, we have one,
You talked about this one.
single family residences. Let's see, the 3.20701 on page 67. Under A, number 1 and number 2, to me, those say the same thing. Do they not?
Yes. Caught a redundancy. Well done.
So we can combine that,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, in fact, that first one says, otherwise there are no restrictions, but that wasn't the idea.
Okay.
So, yeah, no, I'll fix that. Okay, good call. Special residential dwellings, this is ADUs, of which there are, as we talked about, not only is it a growing trend, a lot of market desirability, but also any city over 2,500 in population has to allow them, according to state law.
And it's a local hot topic.
So
Paper.
you're not to 2,500 yet, you will be soon.
By
And when we-
Friday.
And when we first talked about this, you said, might as well create the standards, because it's gonna be required anyway, when you get there.
So one thing I'd like to see in there is that one of the dwellings is owner occupied.
State law says you can't do that.
How come Kaiser just did it?
Well, they're,
Nobody's continuing to do it.
Yeah.
they're dropping that provision.
Owner
I was at the
occupied.
last meeting. It wasn't-
Yeah, okay, so do you wanna, I mean, you can put that in here, but I'll verify that.
Yeah, I think we need to.
Provision.
I think we need to verify it. I mean, I think owner,
So you can't have 2 rentals.
so you can't have 2 rentals. I mean, people can make this a business. I mean, they can come out here, buy a lot and.
Build 2 houses.
And build 2 houses and profit from both of them. I mean, I think one of them being owner occupied, if it's legal, is very reasonable.
And if it's not, make somebody challenge us.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a rule follower, but.
Okay, I'm gonna write it in,
I agree.
and we'll verify that.
I agree.
Okay, any other issues with these standards?
John, but didn't we talk about something about parking with it?
Yeah, everyone has to have a,
I haven't seen it. right?
yeah, I know, this was the original draft, and it hasn't been revised yet, but I'll make sure that parking is in there.
What were we gonna say about
So is
parking?
this-
I don't remember.
An additional parking spot?
Oh, okay.
Well, it's in F for the attached dwellings.
Yeah, which is, it's different, we'll get into that one. This also is a question that you guys are gonna have to think about as SDCs.
Already talked about it.
Okay, good. And not only that, but are you gonna require a separate meter and cost or is that?
I don't want 800 feet.
We don't need to put that in here, but it's something that's gonna need to be resolved.
1,200-foot shop and then 800 feet. I want it to be smaller.
Yeah, it contains the lesser 25% of the floor area of the primary residence or 1,000 square feet. So the max is 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, 800 in the assessment.
Yeah, it says 800.
It does?
D.
No, mine says 1,000.
Well, when you're talking about the
Well, you fit right in here, Miller.
primary residence.
No kidding.
Is that the living area you're talking about, or total square foot of the building?
Total square foot?
of the building? Would include the garage and everything?
Yeah.
So if you got a,
No, we're talking about the primary dwelling.
25% floor area.
It's 25% of the floor area.
And
So do
you're-
you want to
and
say,
You're including the garage in that.
yeah, I didn't distinguish that.
Wow.
that, what's 25% of 3,000?
Wait a minute. 3,000 plus a three-car garage?
Yeah, it's 800.
No, I'm adding my garage and everything, I gotta, you know,
Well, we've got 35.
But it's still a maximum of 1,000 or 800, whatever the number is. So you can't exceed, it's 25%.
Is that a never exceed 800 feet?
Yes,
Yes.
The lesser of
That's pretty small.
yeah, the lesser 25% of the floor area or 800 square feet.
Should it say, or the maximum?
Should say
of the
maximum.
square feet, John?
Can you add the word maximum?
Yeah,
It says the lesser.
okay.
I think it's
800 square feet, 1,000 square feet.
750 square feet.
750.
We have 1,200 square foot houses.
My first house was 950 feet.
Yeah, I think mine was 660.
Yeah.
Well, but Dennis, it says lesser of 25%, so if you have a 1,200-foot house,
Well, no, I'm saying
Yeah, that'd
here
give
in
you a
the city,
400
we
square
have
foot
houses that are 1,200 square feet here within this city.
Yeah, so you're
You're putting an accessory dwelling in a backyard that's almost the size of.
No,
some of the
because
front
it's
houses.
limited
Only
to
be-
25%.
25%.
Okay.
So, sir.
We also need to have something in there that they also cannot exceed the 50% lot coverage.
Yes.
I didn't hear you, Kevin.
Lot coverage.
Oh,
So then we won't have the 1,200 square foot shop and the 800 foot.
Yeah, so if they have a 1,200 square foot shop, they have to convert it to the ADU.
Yep.
Okay.
Or the ADU,
That means you can't.
$100.
which is not unusual.
Unless it's put it all the time.
Yeah. Okay,
Well, I do too, absolutely.
got it. Concerns?
Well, we were talking about owner occupied, at least one of them.
Okay.
Did we
I
already
have that
say
in
you
mind.
couldn't, the
No, either or.
accessory building could not be a manufactured home? Or could it be?
Well, it could be, and a lot of them are.
Well, you'd be down
In fact, there's one of the largest builders, in fact, the largest builder in the states, right here in Albany. Tiny home, here is the name of it, but you look at his stuff, and they're architecturally really
Oh,
pretty cool.
absolutely.
Yeah,
A manufactured home's built just like a stick-built home.
Yeah.
So it's-
So park models, what's it called, the small ones? Park-
actually, park bottles can only be 8 feet in width, but he's building things that are up to 12 feet in width here, which distinguishes it from a park bottle. In fact, the building codes are different. So yes, you could put a park bottle in, if not the standard, but also you could put in one of these nicer tiny homes and greater width. I mean, serve.
Being real picky, I want clarification from these guys. So they say owner occupied, say, the owner of the deed is a husband and wife, and they're gonna let their 21-year-old son live at the front house and rent out the back. Is that 21-year-old son, even though he's not on the deed, does that qualify as owner occupied? Or do you wanna make it owner occupied by need to be mentioned on the deed?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes,
just
yes.
to clarify this.
Yes.
Okay. Well, on the deed of the home, of one of the two homes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you could live in either one of them.
Right, live on either one, but it's not that you're gonna let your son live there,
Mhm.
your ne'er-do-well daughter, whomever, and call that, okay.
Well done, got it.
I mean, I really like their format that they came up with up there, so. If it's kosher.
Yeah, you might, I'm just trying to remember the name of that tiny house place that's in here in Albany, but,
Yeah, there's one
Yeah.
right next to Mike's Garden.
Well,
Yeah, we
have you been up to Hope Valley?
oh, yeah,
Up
that's,
the road, that's awesome.
that is awesome. That's a cool place.
Very cool, yeah.
Yep.
Where is it?
Right along the freeway going.
My Enchanted
Yeah.
Up the hill.
There was an old RV park on the
Where
north side of
park used to
Enchanted
be.
Forest, and it's been converted into Hope Valley Resort. And drive in there, it's pretty cool.
Well, and they've got those ones in Kaiser that are on the lot that are by
Yep.
RVs for sale,
Yep,
so they've got.
yeah. Tell you, architecturally, they're pretty cool.
It's a whole-
There's an outfit in Salem called Idea Box that does, they're basically modular homes, but they're pretty tiny, and they're so cool that IKEA sells them worldwide. Because they kind of have IKEA style and architecture to them. They're pretty neat. Anyway,
First month in the
great
home
fun.
first one.
I'm ready to move into one. I can say that because my wife's not sitting back there. Okay, then we talk about attached dwellings. They're single-family homes on individual platted lots that are attached on one or two sides. In other words, townhouses. Your density's the same. They're still on individual lots, but
Oh, I see.
you just allow them to be connected together.
So there's zero,
Zero lot line houses. These often they take two forms. One is it might look like a duplex, or the other is you have the houses against one side yard line, creating more of a courtyard space on the other side, which often is where the entryway is. It's just it's a housing option, and
Boy, they look wonderful when it's time for re-roofing. We've seen an entire tract of them, and the owners didn't use the same roofing.
We need more of that here, though.
so
There's
what?
not much of that around here. We need more of that.
There's some in Albany.
Some, not much.
Yeah.
There's not much here, not very much.
It's quite a bit in Eugene. There's several in Kaiser and Salem.
There's not much of that here at all.
They're a very, it's an attractive, affordable housing option for those that might want a smaller home. But this doesn't change the density requirements. In other words, you're still gonna have an average of, 10,000 square foot lots. So mostly this is gonna be, I'm gonna guess, at most the duplex thing or the true zero side yard freestanding homes. But your choice whether you want to allow that as an option.
D talks about building separation, so why wouldn't they be subject to the same setbacks?
This allows, it says, well, what that says is if they're not attached to each other, they still have to be 10 feet apart, just like
Subdivision.
any subdivision. Two 5-foot setbacks.
Okay. Because they're side yards.
Mhm.
John, are they required to have
No. No more so than, but they're required to have the two parking spaces because they're single-family homes. We don't require garages in single-family homes. If we do, then it applies.
About the
Good
parking.
job.
Yes, you do. I'm sure you do, because I think I'm wrong. All right, I'm not hearing any objection to keeping this in here for now.
What about parking down here?
It,
F. Does that require a wider driveway? What are we getting into there?
F.
One off-street parking
This
space.
doesn't seem like this fits here.
I'm not seeing F. What did I miss here?
It says one off-street parking space is required in addition to that required for the primary dwelling.
It sounds like ADU instead of.
So 2 are required for the primary dwelling. Now, wait a minute.
So this is speaking to an ADU, this F, but it's
Yeah,
in the,
seems like
in
an
the
ADU
section
as
of,
opposed to attached.
Page 70.
We're looking at a slightly different draft. Oh, it's not on here. Yeah, okay. I wonder why that's not on there. It's
Well, it
funny.
makes sense.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, basically what this gets to, this is interesting. If you happen to have for the, the thing is, okay, I'm babbling here. If we're sticking with the 60-foot or 80-foot lot width, you're not gonna get more than 2 adjacent to each other. It just physically can't be done.
Yeah, this
So-
needs to go under multifamily stuff.
Yeah, and then you still are, see, we're, a lot of jurisdictions will allow in a case like this, you keep your density standards, but you can reduce the lot width. So that you can have maybe 4 homes lined up, a townhouse kind of project. And I don't think we're going there here. So, that parking thing really isn't necessary.
I think it really does belong on the other page of the
Does
accessory
it belong to
dwelling
the
units,
ADU though?
because I don't see anything addressing parking with the ADUs.
Yeah, well, ADUs, we require 1 parking space per ADU.
Well, that's what this.
In
That's what
addition.
that is.
That's what that says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't have anything under the ADU.
Okay, but under the attached dwellings, you still have the same requirement for 2
So they're saying
spaces.
maybe you need to put this under the ADU.
I wonder if that got moved.
That's what.
Yeah, I'm thinking so. Okay, all right, got
Thanks,
it.
Boris.
Okay, yeah, I think so. Thank
So
you,
could
Sarah.
you have, on these attached dwellings, could you have, let's say, a 2,000 square foot house attached to a 1,000 square foot house? Could you have a door between them?
No.
No?
Well, I don't know why you couldn't. You know, in a case like this, where they're owned separately, you're gonna have,
Sure.
the firewalls that separate them. Unlike an apartment that doesn't have firewalls between individual units. This is still gonna have what, it's a 4-hour wall or 2-hour wall that's still gonna separate them. And so if you put a door in that, it's gonna have to be a fire door to make that work. But I suppose it could have
Firewall.
I was just thinking.
just a, I've never seen that.
That doesn't make a lot of sense. No.
Why? The firewall?
No, it doesn't
Oh.
make a sense. You could get access.
Well, I was just thinking
Yeah.
of Steve and living
No,
with his daughter.
With his daughter, yeah, well,
We've got you moved in there already, Steve.
Okay,
You'll have to go out and around.
tell me when I'm ready.
Okay. All right, let's take a look at permitted uses.
Ooh, let's go.
So,
I mean, temporary uses, yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a question? You made the comment, we don't require garages now for residential.
I'm thinking, I think maybe we do.
Okay.
There's a lot in here. and-
We do for manufactured homes, we just.
Yeah, I think we do
decided
for
to
single
have-
family too. Okay. And if not, we should. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure it's there. Okay, 3.209, permitted temporary uses.
How are we leaving at 8:30?
It's past 8:30, so it doesn't,
Huh?
it's past 8:30.
It's past
so it doesn't
8:30,
apply.
so we
Yeah.
can stop whenever you're ready,
Yeah, I'm done.
where a majority of you are ready.
Okay.
This is pretty straightforward. I bet we can hit through this really fast. Tree and fireworks are permitted.
Let's finish through this.
let's do it.
You know, you could have tree stands, fireworks stands. You can have amusement, recreational things in the commercial zone. This, allows the carnival to be set up in the Fred Meyer parking lot kind of thing, which doesn't apply here yet, but who knows? Those are pretty straightforward. Food service,
No, wait, trees and, oh, never mind. Found the zone.
So this is saying that they require a temporary business permit, which we don't have, right?
But we will.
Maybe.
for the,
It's under 7.
Yeah.
Under 7.
yeah, it does require a temporary business permit. So the question is, do you want to have a permitting process for this?
That's the city council that's fighting over that one.
City council, that's.
Yeah, okay, so let's just flag that.
It
And
says they have to display the required, we don't have a required, so they
Okay.
self-cancels.
Okay, food services. This is food carts. I think we talked about food carts once.
We
didn't we?
did with up the road there, I thought that was pretty much,
That's the food pod there, okay. but that would fall under C, and so I think we already talked about that, but I'll make sure all that language is reflected here.
180 days
Those
on these guys?
would be under temporary uses, even though the infrastructure is there for them to be permanently solved.
On temporary, I mean, on D?
No, on C.
On
C,
C.
yeah. Yeah, we've got to make sure that those utilities are covered.
We don't have a time limit on those guys. Here it says they have to move out in 180 days.
Do you want them to move out in
Unlimited
180
renewals.
days?
No.
No.
No,
No, you won't, you don't.
no. No, it's gonna take them that long to put up all their signs.
Okay.
There's only two left down there.
Okay, good.
I'm sorry, quick question. Am I reading this that a food service cart can be in a residential area? Because I'm looking under, well, is
Where?
that right?
Yeah, I don't know why it makes that reference to D. But no, it doesn't. We talked about having a more comprehensive chapter or section on this. That would get into the details of where they're allowed and that kind of thing. So I think we covered that 2 or 3 work sessions ago, and I'll come back, when we come back with the next draft, filling that in.
Thank you.
Well, A and B talk about commercial or industrial zones, so why shouldn't the rest of them?
Yeah. Okay, we have temporary construction facilities. You know, these are the contractor's office, the shack that often goes up with construction, that kind of thing. Yard sales and auctions. It establishes some standards there. No more than 4 sales a year, each not exceeding 3 days for your neighbor's yard sale or your yard sale. Are yard sales an issue you want to talk about? This is kind of universal language here, so.
You know, start later in the morning, because I'm not up that early. Start at 7 a.m.
If Steve's gonna come, then start him.
That's all the good stuff.
So is this, it has some limitations in here. Do you want any kind of limitations on these things or not? It sounds like not.
Well, I don't
I
want the
think-
perpetual.
Yeah, I think the 4 sales or.
It's just keeping that perpetual garage sale thing.
Yeah, okay.
I think you ought to keep that in there.
I do too.
It talks about merchandise and signs shall remain on private property.
Yeah, that means you're not putting it on, out on the sidewalk.
Telephone posts, stop signs.
Yeah, that's what I'm
The corner
thinking.
of City,
Yeah.
the corner of City Hall.
Technically, there's a law against that anyway, but try to enforce it.
Yeah.
I don't think we've had
It goes on and says, city council may authorize additional permitted temporary uses, like for events and festivals and stuff like that. So this is just acknowledging that those kind of land uses can happen with the council approval. RVs is temporary habitation. Use of an RV for temporary habitation is limited to 30 consecutive days, total of 60 days in a calendar year. It shall require written authorization from the city. So this is,
Is that a permit?
What does that mean? Does that mean anybody living in there for 1 day requires authorization?
if you're going to, yeah, it does, and maybe that's a little restrictive.
Yeah.
When, you know, Uncle Fred shows up in his Winnebago and is just parked out front for a day.
So I guess we need clarification from the county.
Yeah, haven't we got a limit on RVs on the street? I think we already have a limit, a week or 10 days or something like that.
Now, but
We-
as this is written, it just says if somebody's gonna spend one night in there, you need city
I know that.
authorization. Yes, correct.
I want to just make sure it cross-references with the habitation ordinance as it exists.
I know we got that.
And I think if we're gonna have some permitting, it ought to be for anything exceeding 7 days or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
How would that would affect somebody living in your driveway that's 30 feet off the road?
It applies.
Yeah. And the current code affects it as well. There's a prohibition.
So anywhere on your property.
So you couldn't have someone moving up from Yuma, Arizona during the summer to live on your property.
Well, I do have somebody that comes up, the original people that own my property, that actually lived out here for years. So I didn't want to see how that would affect me.
Yeah, right now,
They usually
there's a
spend
prohibition against it.
Right now, you got 30
More than
days.
30 days.
30 days.
Yeah, and I think it's 60 in the calendar year, so 30 days at the time. And I don't know, I don't think it's spelled out as to what break needs to be between 30. If you can go 30 and be gone for one day and come back for the remaining 30. But right now, there's only 60 days.
Hey, they're gonna quarter my sidewalk.
I was just gonna say that. Is that,
Yeah, they could have an RV pad and have some park next to the house.
that's different, but we actually see where they run them across the
Yeah, it's an
sidewalk.
ongoing issue in town where the cross sidewalk.
Yeah.
So what have we got on that now? They're parked on the street.
Isn't it
They
72
need a dry
hours?
count.
Pardon?
They need a dry count.
Well, you mean, is that somebody
And
living
park there for a
in
week.
there, or just an RV parked on the street?
Just, I know, no, somebody comes to visit.
A week. It's already a week, I think.
A week?
I think it already is.
Doesn't,
That seems
doesn't the
excessive.
vehicle have to move every 72 hours or something like that?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
That's it, anything greater than 72 hours.
I thought it was 72 hours or
I think
something.
it's 72 hours that the vehicle has to move, or,
But again, as the mayor brought up, there can't be any utilities, put in place.
Yeah, the hose, the
Sewers.
cord,
Sewer hose,
Mhm.
cord.
My
the
neighbors do all
water
the
and
time.
power are a real problem.
And we see.
Sewer into the catch
So
basin.
no visitors with an
But
RV
we'd
more than
rather
a
that
day and a
get-
half.
Well, you can dry count, I mean, you know. it's-
You can't have visitors for more than a day and a half, and they gotta leave and come back.
That means I can't put my slide out into the road either, huh?
So they can park in your backyard for 30 days.
Okay.
But, so did we get
No, it's a
clarification,
week.
John, on this, as the way this is right now on, on the written authorization, you're amending that to some extent? making
Yes.
it somewhat more reasonable?
I'm gonna say, 7 days without a permit. Is that good or bad?
Well,
I mean, it's, what do you,
Somebody shouldn't have to be there more than 7 days without a permit. I think that's about right.
So basically what's gonna happen is if you get somebody gonna come stay with you there for 10 days, park in your driveway or so, you would actually need to come in here and obtain a permit, that's what the way this is being drafted. There's gonna be a replacement in 7 days.
What's the cost of a permit?
Yeah, at the beginning stage, that's what my mom would say, when we go to the dirt. Like, they're like fish, she said,
Yeah.
in 3 days you're getting smelled.
there isn't a permit now.
Is not.
In fact, it says written authorization, so it's, you know, there isn't any structure for that.
And we haven't really had any problem. Yeah, I can see the street end of it in the driveway. I'm kind of out behind Steve's barn. You never even know they're there, so,
Yeah, it's all subject
Nobody
to
knows my trailer's back there.
complaint
Can't see it.
enforcement.
yeah, okay.
So the issue is really, do you even want them to obtain a permit? I mean, again, I mean, go in, but, yeah, and it is, it's really complaint enforcement is.
That's what I'm thinking.
Seems like the
I
big
think
thing
that
is the
The
on-street.
bigger issue is the on-street issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, with people running their cord and, you know.
Which we already have covered in the municipal code.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So maybe this doesn't even need to be here.
I don't want it there.
Yeah, let's remove
Does
it.
it already cover the 30-day and 60-day thing though?
The existing code does, yes.
You
And
were
so,
talking about the-
yes, it does.
We were gonna leave this in here, right, but just take off the.
Take out the necessity for the permit.
Mhm.
Because I don't think anybody's gonna do it anyway.
Right.
Really. Who's gonna do it?
So I can't use that.
Okay, on that, hey, we're almost done with this chapter.
72 hours on the street, don't let them in your driveway. It won't handle the weight.
Should we look at bed and breakfast, the next one? How many bed and breakfasts are there in Millersburg? 0? Well, here's your opportunity.
Yeah.
All right, these are industry standard kind of standards for bed and breakfasts. I do know there was one city that I was talking to that got really hung up on the word breakfast, saying, why does it have to be limited to breakfast? we ended up saying bed and meals or something instead, but do you care?
You might be anal, but not that anal.
All right. There's that, then we've got the operation standards for it. Houses of worship, these are all standard requirements. Church has to come through a site development review process.
I noticed this talks about on-site, on-premise owner, which is what the big deal up in Salem is right now, right?
For the,
Bed and breakfast,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it is. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Okay, sorry.
Have you ever seen the Morrow House?
I saw pictures.
The one in
on
question? Oh, yeah, I've been there, driven by quite a few times. It's, the potential of that, what's being suggested is really interesting, if the how it works. This is a mansion that the owner of a strip club wants to buy and turn into a bed and breakfast.
I like it.
Think about it.
I like it. I like it.
It's a 9-bedroom.
Your daughter may not get you after all.
Lots of taxes. I like it.
Yeah,
We get lots of taxes out of it.
yeah.
They might even fix the road.
Yes.
On the location, A, on bed and breakfast.
Yep.
So it has to be within.
It says meals are limited to breakfast and snacks, only to overnight guests.
Yeah, so that's a good question. 300 feet of an arterial or collector?
Which are what streets?
So I couldn't have a bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
Which means right smack in the middle of your subdivision. Couldn't do it, couldn't do a bed and breakfast.
What's the purpose extra?
The one that's next to me.
No, I think it's maybe a little more character. That's
To
standard.
have near a street?
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say that's a necessary provision, it's just do you want it or not?
Well, let me ask this question, are the neighbors gonna have any say on whether or not that goes in next to them?
No. Not the way this is drafted.
Wouldn't the zoning?
Well, it's a site design review process. So yeah, the neighbors would have a hearing. I mean, you would have a hearing and approve it.
I thought site designs, you didn't come to us, do they do come to us?
Trying to remember. I have too many codes. No, they don't.
Wouldn't it have to fit within a zone though? I mean,
No, bed and
it
breakfast.
can fit in a single family?
Yeah, because it's a single-family dwelling. You're just renting out a bedroom.
But it's a home occupied business too,
Yeah.
so then they can only have, okay, you win.
Some of the two guest rooms, generally. So shall I take that location standard out?
I don't see why it's necessary. We'll see if we have problems.
Okay. Can always change it. Almost done. Houses of worship. Anything there? Something that I want to put in, I was thinking about this, is lighting. Is to say that lighting, all exterior lighting must be directed so that it doesn't create glare on adjacent properties, which can be a problem with a church. It's lighting its parking lot and that kind of a thing.
Good idea.
That should be standard in just about anything and everything we've got here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, general standards. This
Well,
is,
on bed and breakfast on D, you've got meals limited to breakfast and snacks, did we decide not to do that?
yeah, well, that's your question. I mean,
I don't know, I'm just asking, because you talked about it.
Well, I think anything you do should be limited to the guests.
right,
I'm not opposed to serving dinner instead of breakfast, but
But this is saying they can't.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But it should be limited, otherwise you have a cafe.
And shall be
Right.
served only to overnight guests.
Mhm. Meals shall be served only.
Okay,
I didn't hear anybody else speak on. Ryan's asleep, we're not talking right now.
Well, I think you got a good idea.
Got it.
Good
Good point. Houses of worship, walk through that, I think that's straightforward. And then we just have several general standards. Talks about lots of record. These things are something that, you just have to put in here so that you establish some standards for, or understanding of those things. Lots abutting a partial street. I think we talked about that a little bit, where, okay, what this says is that if you have a street that, a lot that's abutting a partial street, the right-of-way has to be dedicated for the ultimate street width, according to the standards that are in the transportation system plan. And that's not requiring the improvement, it's just saying, if you're gonna build on there, you're gonna dedicate that right-of-way so that the improvement can be made down the road. Pretty standard language. There should protection of runoff of natural drainage channels, saying a property owner will not allow water carrying capacity of any drainage way to deteriorate, subsequently contribute to flood hazard. They have to maintain those drainage ways. That actually goes back to, 1,200-year-old English common law, which basically says you can't change the velocity or flow across the property, the natural flow, because otherwise you're going to impact other properties. Farm use. This is always an interesting one. Do you want farms?
Yes, we have them now.
Yeah.
Oh,
We
when
have
we go
to.
back, I'm sorry, John, quick clarification.
Mhm.
Go back to this runoff capacity. It's talking about, this is dead vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
What about the accumulation of silt and dirt, things like that?
Let's keep those covered. Failure to
Yeah,
maintain
yeah.
the water carrying capacity of the drainage way.
Mhm.
So. that-
But, okay, well, shall remove excess debris from the channel, including dead vegetation. Do we need to, silt-
Well, we could say and silt.
I would prefer that if we could be
I have no
more
issue.
specific.
Same sediment.
Yeah, silt and sediments. That would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any objection?
DSL here, you say that.
Yeah, these aren't
Hold on
wetlands.
to your permits.
Yeah, right, yeah, yeah.
Okay, farm use and livestock. The, basically says livestock is prohibited. Growing plants is allowed. The question comes up about, therefore, some of the larger properties that probably are running, maybe a couple of horses now or something. Or what we ran into in Yamhill was this monstrous issue over miniature horses. Are they pets or are they livestock? And it was interesting. In the long run, we wrote a code provision which allowed miniature horses that met where the lot and property had to meet certain standards. Because there were two places in town that had had them for years. And
But were they allowed under livestock or pet?
they actually were, it was livestock, but it was an allowed type of livestock. There we go. Even though they really were pets. So, I don't know what issues there are or what you care about with this, but if we don't have something, then it just raises the possibility that someone's gonna come in and complain about someone that has a cow out in their backyard.
We probably should limit it to, we got cows that have been here before we were here.
Right.
We have farmland that was here. You might say, put it on at least an acre, and then absolutely no hogs, for one.
And you can't move here and start
That's
complaining immediately.
discriminating.
Well, you smell it, you think
do.
discrimination.
That's
Surely-
not even.
Surely we're not gonna shut down our pumpkin
I
stand.
would
Yeah,
put
you
it
can't
on.
complain within 5 years of moving here.
That's gonna be a tough one to enforce in this town.
True.
So is 1 acre big enough?
Well, I think, oh God, I did a lot of research for Yamhill, and there's things like, all the Polk County cities adopted a common code which gets into animal equivalence, which is essentially a mature sheep is one animal equivalent. So on an acre, you can have 10 animal equivalents, which might be 2 horses or 10 sheep or 20 miniature goats or whatever, you know, and it just gets really crazy. So, yes.
I think we had a long discussion on this under the zoning.
Yeah.
And we addressed it in the rural zone.
Depends on what you need.
Yeah, it seems to me we did go through this, you're right. So, we'll, we've got some stuff, we'll come back on that, we'll look at it.
For self-sustaining if you're not feeding.
Okay, general exceptions for building heights, you can see that, aerials, flagpoles, your CB radio antenna, those are allowed. Height exceptions for public buildings. You can go higher, and additions to existing structures, which gets back into, essentially this is saying that if the code changes to where a person couldn't do an addition, this allows them to do the addition, which might come into play. It's just as covering a circumstance where it might come up, and we don't want to be onerous on a person that can't remodel or expand on their own property. Okay, going on, there's a section there for public dedications that needs to get fleshed out. Miscellaneous exceptions to setback requirements, bus shelters, all kinds of stuff there. Required setbacks, service station setback, drainage way setbacks. Goes on, talks about things that are allowed in all zones, things like cables and pipes and that kind of thing. Then we get into nonconformity, which is the grandfathering provisions. And what you get into in this is, basically what this says is that if you have a use that either through use or through its dimensions, the code changes and it doesn't comply, they're grandfathered in and can exist forever. If it's discontinued for a period of more than 1 year, it cannot be resumed. That's if you've got a non-conforming use that goes out. It can be replaced within a year with the same use, but if it goes away for more than a year, it doesn't happen. If a use is destroyed or damaged, then it can't be replaced. But I want to ask you a question about that. Oh, here's the exception. Yeah, we did write that in. Okay. Alteration or change of use, you can't do that. The exemptions. Okay, now this is the one I wanted to make sure you were happy with or not. Non-conforming single-family homes may be replaced within 1 year of the date of destruction without the need to comply with the standards for non-conformity. In other words, what this gets at is if you have a single-family home and it's non-conforming, you could still rebuild it or whatever after a fire or an earthquake or whatever comes along. And that, not only is that compassionate, but that's the way that, you probably couldn't get a mortgage to buy a non-conforming house if this kind of provision didn't exist. So.
Why does that say though that it has to be from a fire? I read that to just say, I have a non-conforming house, I can replace it, I can tear it down and replace it with another non-conforming house.
Well, it says the date of destruction.
So you're saying, well, destruction,
Yeah.
all those are in another over.
Well, so if you wanted to tear your non-conforming house down and build a new one, you could, within a year.
That's the way
Yeah,
I
but
read
you have to
this.
start.
That's where I read that.
Yeah.
If you leave a wall there, it's just a remodel, it's not a new construction.
Yeah, in fact, I think that what it would need to say,
This. I think if you want to, yeah, it depends what you want. If you want to just encourage non-conforming to continue on, maybe we need to amend this.
I really think what it might mean is that yes, you could tear down a non-conforming dwelling and rebuild it with the same setbacks as what it is. But I don't think that's the intent. Yeah, with the same non-conformance. The intent of it, though, I think, is that if it's destroyed, the building is destroyed by,
Well, we-
disaster. We need to define that.
Yeah, we need to define if that's. what
Destruction.
The PC's intent is.
Is that your intent? If it burns down,
Yeah,
Or an earthquake or a
Yeah.
flood or
Natural disaster.
natural disaster.
Is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about?
Isn't that what the C says already?
Well, E says, is if you read.
I know, but
Oh,
it's C and
C.
it says that.
Okay.
See, kind of,
yeah, but this is an exemption, which means you can infer that it's exempt from all those other standards. I think I'd rather be specific on
I don't
The
think we
question
want
is, do we have any non-conforming single-family homes?
it. And I don't know that we do, and we probably won't even when this is adopted, so.
Do you even need this exemption? Because, yeah, look at C. C kind of just says
Yeah.
what E would say if we meant E.
Yep,
Yeah.
you're right.
and that's, explains it the way we want it to be explained.
Seems to be.
Okay, he's out.
But this isn't just for homes, isn't this for all buildings? Because we just did a partition and one of the buildings on the partition was a non-conforming building.
shop, yeah, and so
Well-
this would apply to.
It was
The E's for a single family.
E's for a single family.
but does that say this? That's why I'm asking.
E says single family, C says basically for any
Right.
non-conforming use,
Yeah.
which would include a single.
So we want to,
Include a non-conforming single family. So the question is, do you want to have a non-conforming use that's destroyed by a natural disaster, regardless of what it is? You rebuilt to the same non-conforming use, whether it's a single family or a barn or a shed or garage? Or do you want to just limit that rebuild just to a single family home?
Personally, single-family home.
We rebuilt the latest
well, I think he
construction
should be able to
standards.
rebuild his cabinet shop.
I don't think for a building permit, you'd have to,
Do it.
oh, we're just talking mostly
Gas cabinet
setbacks, though,
shop.
aren't we?
Yeah, it's setbacks, it might be height, and it also is use. Someone that would have a use that doesn't conform with the zone standards.
That's the one that we just approved.
So if you wanted to apply to everything, you use C. If you wanted to only apply to single families, you would use E, but you need to amend the language. Because C basically says any non-conforming
You
use.
like this one?
I prefer C myself.
So you have a non-conforming business that burns down, so it's missing setback standards, access standards, or whatever.
Gotta go to the new
Some cities will
standards.
allow you to.
And that's the question, would you want a business to rebuild to the new standards?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think so too.
Yep.
Because at some point, you gotta get them back into conformance, right?
Yeah, and part of the whole purpose of nonconformity is to be compassionate, but also to say, in time, every business rebuilds somehow, every use, and when it does, it has to comply.
So I guess a prime example of this would be, and it's occurred, could be Millwright Farms, Woods Road. They're in a rural,
Take C out.
rural residential 10 now, zoning. They had a fire there 12, 15 years ago that killed one of the employees, and they rebuilt them. Right now, the way our code reads, the way I read it, they could not, they're an existing non-conforming the way our zoning is there now. We don't allow commercial or industrial property in that zone, so technically they could rebuild there, if I'm reading the code, or when we look at our R10 right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's farm.
My brain's not.
Yeah,
But when you look at what our zoning is, what the underlying zoning is, it's RR10 versus RS10. That is not an allowable use under the way our code currently reads.
So farming is
The farming is, but the commercial operation is not.
the way our new rural residential zone is written.
Now, they'll be able to continue.
It's
on.
basically their big barn you're talking about that all their facilities are in for doing what they
They're
do.
doing the pelleting
Right.
and stuff that,
But it's that building.
yeah,
They're
You're
just doing
talking
seed
about.
cleaning, they don't do pelleting.
what's that?
They're just doing seed cleaning
Yeah.
right now.
They don't do pellets.
They don't do pellets anymore.
Even if it, but that is
Still non-conforming.
it would be a non-conforming.
So the question to you is, for a commercial or industrial use that is non-conforming, if it's destroyed, can they rebuild exactly as they were, or do they need to comply with the applicable code? That's question one. And then question two is, do you want single-family homes to be exempt from that and be allowed to be rebuilt?
As non-conforming.
Yes.
No, I think they should
And that
conform.
would just be for the,
Single-family
that would
homes.
just be
But
for
the only-
Yeah, no
the,
matter
they couldn't
commercial,
sell the
whatever, they're
property
gonna build to
and
the new zone code.
had to be rebuilt
But they
non-conforming.
can't.
Could.
The only conflict I
So
see
if
is
no
the
right
zoning
down,
on,
they
some-
could not
I mean,
be
that
there.
seems to be the
Why can't they
stickler.
be there?
Because that's what they're saying,
Oh,
right?
because it's residential.
Yeah,
zone.
because it's zoned R10, right? So if it burnt down again,
Rural residential ten.
rural residential 10,
Could
they're
be
done, they're out of business.
Well, they died to another location.
Exactly, but they're out of business in Millersburg or
Yeah,
that
but,
location.
how about auxiliary building for that whole site? That could be an auxiliary building.
They're doing a commercial activity though.
Yeah, it's on a residential, on our,
See, that's your whole zone farm.
we need to get back to this one.
See, that's
Yeah,
your
let's-
zone farm.
Most
Let's get back to the
jurisdictions-
subject. Yeah,
Most jurisdictions anymore don't allow rebuilding except for a single-family home.
To non-conform.
But do those
Yeah, a non-conforming
jurisdictions-
building can't be rebuilt as it was, or a use reestablished if it's destroyed, with the exception of a single-family home.
Well, I can see where setbacks might be an issue if you were rebuilding. I mean, if you've lived in this house for 50 years, you may have a lot of other stuff that prohibits the setbacks of a conforming
Well, we
house.
have large lots, that shouldn't be a problem.
If that was zoned farm slash commercial, would they be able to rebuild? If it wasn't residential?
If it was a commercial zone, probably.
If it was farming slash commercial, you know, ever,
Yeah, but then they couldn't sell it for the 500 house development that's gonna go in there.
why couldn't they?
Well, not if you zone it commercial.
Well, you get a rezone, you sell it to the developer, and then he gets a rezone.
well, that's a whole nother thing. Let's stick
Yeah.
with what we got going here.
All right, so,
So what you're talking about then is you want to know if we want to take C out and adopt E,
yes.
or keep both of them?
Well, yeah, it's keep E, which is the exemption for single-family homes, but commercial and industrial uses have to rebuild according to all the code requirements.
Yeah,
Well, I will vote for that.
absolutely.
Okay,
How's the rest
so
of you
C
feel?
basically is coming out.
Even the house should be.
I'm good with that.
If it burns down, it's gonna be built in a new code.
Well, I hear one person saying that.
You won't have that many cases of that happening.
No.
No,
In this town, there's not
no.
I mean, that's-
much of the way of nonconformity. A lot of other places it is. That's the end of the chapter.
John, and I'm sorry, you want to
Article.
spell out what destruction means or for E?
Yep, yep, that's under definitions.
The other, in C, there was three.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, we don't even have farming zoning.
Yep.
That's unbelievable, we don't even have farming zoning here.
Okay. All right.
Good way to get rid of farming.
Property, well, that
Is that
vacant
brought
property
up?
will now go to the rural residential zone?
No, what I'm saying is, the use there currently is not allowed, the existing non-conforming are R10 as being proposed.
Okay, but the new code, it will
Our
go.
new code.
I like these
will
diagrams.
Not allow that use if it were to run tomorrow,
I think
to go back.
we don't have the map yet showing it, but I think we're assuming it would be rural residential.
That's what I'm asking.
So, based on what we have achieved.
Right.
Since that's been here so long, could it fall under the historical part of it? No?
I don't think so.
All right, we meet again 1 week from tonight. I think you all got Article 4 tonight was passed out to you,
Yes.
right? Everyone got it? Read it. And we'll get through it next week.
Okay. Any more comments before we adjourn?
No.
Okay.